We are, yes.
We are, okay. All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Mundelein Elementary School District 75 Board of Education meeting for Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Crowley.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
St. Clair. Here. Hitzke.
Here.
Gallegos.
Here.
Tinkerhead. Here. Who is here?
Here. Okay, the first item on our agenda is always citizen comments. Is there anyone that would like to address the board tonight? If you're online on the Zoom, you can click on the raise hand icon on the bottom of the screen and we will connect you so you can make comments to the board. Anyone? Okay. Moving on, our first topic tonight is District 75 report, and the superintendent is going to give us the update for the mid-year review.
Good evening, everyone. This evening, the main topic is our midterm review. We're pretty excited to be able to provide the information to you. I think the way I'd like to describe this is a masterpiece in the works with a painting. We've really got a lot of the outline put together, the formation, you're starting to see it come together. And where we are in the process, and we're starting a lot of stuff new for ourselves, are laying the foundational pieces that we hope for you as a board, you'll be able to see the path that we are taking as a district within our classrooms and how we're trying to support the adults. And we still have areas to grow. And we're already finding things early on that we want to make changes. And to me, that is also showing that we are learning from the new process and we're moving forward with it. And to be able to do this, I want to remind you, we started back in July in saying that we wanted to have a regular routine, a rhythm for us with providing goals, which will happen in the summer. We want to do a mid-year update, and then we'll have another one at the end of this year. So in June or July, when we have all of our data, then you'll get the full picture of what took place during this past year. So without further delay, I'd like to ask for Cindy Smith and Laura Ehas to come up to do the data review. Laura and Cindy.
Hi, excited to talk to you about data. It's one of our favorite topics and we're determined to make it one of your favorite topics. First thing we wanted to talk about is when we're bringing you data. So we brought data to you this summer in June and July, and then we haven't come back until now. And the data we're actually presenting to you is our fall data because winter data is not in yet. We're taking that right now. So we'd like to suggest that we come in the future in November. So you see the data when it's fresh, because this is the fall data. And then come back again in March and then in the summer. So even though this is a mid-year review, we don't have the mid-year data in yet. That won't be until March. Does that make sense? Okay. Next slide, Anna. This is just a reference slide to remind you that the first data set that we're looking at is our benchmark data. We collect this 2 times a year in fall and winter. And it's a criterion reference test, which means that there's just a criteria by grade level of where you expect the child to be. Okay, next slide. Can you click on the top link for me, Anna? Sure. Yeah. That's it. You just saw it. I saw the first part of it there somewhere. That's it right there. Awesome. And then to the purple tab on the bottom. So this is the summary sheet of the data. So this is the kindergarten fall data. So green means that you're on grade level. Blue means you're a half a year below grade level. Scroll up a little bit for me, Anna. So as we look at the data, and then you have first grade, they've taken it twice. So they took it last year in winter and then again now in fall. And so each grade level, as you look at the data, we are seeing that summer regression. So you can see we had 32% of our students in the green last winter. When they came back in the fall, we were at 20%. So we lost kids in the green. So that speaks to some summer learning loss. So important that we take a look at our summer school programming and offer some summer experiences for kids to help mitigate that learning loss. We're seeing that pretty consistent throughout the data sets that we're having some summer learning loss, which is not uncommon. All districts battle summer learning loss, but we want to definitely try to decrease this as much as possible. In terms of anticipated growth, scroll back just a little bit. So you have the K.
Up or down?
So this one's showing, okay, and then this one. If you look across the two, so this is our fall kindergarten. This was winter kindergarten last year. So our best prediction of where we'd hope the growth that we're gonna see with this current kindergarten class would be looking from here to the other cohort. So we're hoping that 14 will jump to 32 after we finish collecting our winter data now. So that's our best prediction, is just looking at our last growth rates to anticipate what our current growth rates will be. We won't know until we collect the data, and we'll have that for you in March. But just as you're looking at data, those are the two ways to look at it. Some takeaways, other than the learning loss piece and the anticipated growth, we are still seeing literacy as a priority that we need to keep working on. I did want to point out, if you scroll up the data, the change in assessment, just so when you're looking at it, you're not alarmed. One more to second grade there. Oh no, I think that's on yours, Laura. Yeah, that's on hers. Sorry. Okay, those are the big points for the FMP. Any questions about looking at that? Okay, I'm going to turn over to Laura for other data.
We'll go back to the PowerPoint.
To the presentation?
Yes. So again, if we think back, we go to the next slide. If we think back to the last time that we came and we spoke to you, we talked a little bit about our plan, and we talked about our second data set being related to the STAR data that we collect. We collect that data 3 times a year. And we collect it in both English and Spanish for literacy. And then we also have math data. You can go to the next slide. This you should look at the same way that Cindy just went over the benchmark data. We are looking at the kind of the same takeaways. We see demonstration of that summer regression pretty clearly in the data. And again, our best prediction of how our students will fare is by looking at the cohort ahead of them and seeing where they ended up in the winter of last year. We had talked to you about how we still were lacking some baseline data previously. So now that has been collected. So now when you click on that link at the top, you will see, can you click on that link? When you go in and you click on that, you'll be able to look at, oh no,
It doesn't like it now. I had to open it
Okay.
up separately.
So when you do open that, you'll be able to look across all of the grade levels and see how they have performed in the spring of last year to the fall of this year. We have data that shows that our dual and our monolingual data is actually showing very similar trends, especially regarding the summer regression. And math is showing less regression from spring to fall than literacy at this point. Our overall district goal was based on the students on STAR data and whether or not they demonstrate proficiency and growth. Those two measures are something that has to be looked at from fall to spring. So this is something that we won't be able to report on until we come back in June and can show you how students have done over the course of the year. But overall, in terms of working towards the goals that we presented before, the top one about the annual proficiency and growth, that'll be something we visit with you in June. The baseline data that we talked about collecting for grades K through second grade, and then also that 6th grade cohort for Spanish data and literacy, that has all been completed and collected, and that's what you can find in the data sorts that we provided. And then the movement in the data should be supported by all of the department goals that you're going to be updated on today. And then we'll be able to come back, hopefully in a few months, and give you some good updated data on how things are going as of today. Do you have any questions?
I guess maybe for both of you.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll get answered later on. But, you know, we had the regression over the summer.
Yeah.
Is there plans, talks, things being discussed as to how we can combat that with summer coming up again?
That's a
so
great
that
question.
There isn't as much regression.
And actually, can I tag on to his, because I think it's part of the same answers. So we did have a summer program that was targeted for targeted students last summer. So was there any analysis about how that went for that group of kids? And how does that tie into
Mhm.
then Al's question about future programming for the summer coming up?
So the summer school analysis is being done currently and reviewed so that we can make a pretty solid plan and recommendation for a summer program. And so that's something that will, I think Jamie and Sarah will probably report on in the future in terms of what the plan is. But yes, the district's direction is to try to support that summer regression.
Thank you.
A great question. Thanks for asking. Any other questions?
I have questions. I just want to say thanks for the schedule for the assessment. I think that timeline makes sense given the assessment schedule. Definitely see that need for the summer reading, that regression in the summer, something we definitely want to make sure that we stay on top of, but look great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We're excited for the new data. We're
Yeah.
hoping it shows great growth, all the work we're doing. Next up is the principals, so I'd like to invite them to come up.
Good evening. My name is Mark Pilot. I'm the principal at Carl Sandburg Middle School. I'm going to kick off the shared services or the midterm goal update report for the principals. We will all be reporting on our individual schools, but we did want to just start refocusing, as Dr. Meyer stated. We did come before the board back in June, and we wanted to focus on two main goals. One was the mental health of the Mundelein school community, our restorative restart. And the second one was our learning, our engagement in learning through a focus on literacy. So if you can go to the next slide. A restorative restart was what we titled it. And basically our goal was we wanted to aspire to ensure that all members of the Mundelein school community feel connected, prepared, and supported. We know our kids back in July, as we explained, had an 18-month hiatus from most of them had a 18-month hiatus from in-person learning. So we needed to reestablish that. So that restart piece and those goals focus on these two areas. The first one that we're going to talk about is the restorative restart and just that collaborative effort that is going on between the teachers, the families, and the students. So if we can go to the next slide. What we did as a school district, and we connected the Mundelein High School. So if you watch the Mundelein, the District 120, you'll see a very similar graph that they showed as well. We aligned our 4 schools to the themes of who are we, just bringing the kids back in, letting them know that you're a tiger, you're a lion, eagle, or a wolf, and that we aspire to live the codes within those schools. Then we went to humanity, just how do you be a good friend, a good neighbor, help one another. Currently in this January and February month, we're talking about wellness. And just, how do I take care of me? Whether that's getting to bed on time, eating healthy, regular exercise, dealing with stress. Our 6th, for example, our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are in their health unit where they talk a lot about just adolescent stress and how to manage that. And then we stay with wellness, but we talk about healthy habits. So as we leave, hopefully we can combat that summer learning loss through maybe some healthy habits about summer reading, just thinking and growing and continuing to engage your mind. So those we are all focusing on. And then the next slide is basically what we started at Carl Sandburg Middle School. So we wanted to bring a lot of things back. We wanted to bring our full sports program back. We wanted to talk about bringing our in-person advisory program back and just all of these pieces. And then the success that we've had so far is the next slide. And what progress we've made, I think there are some key pieces that we've had. We started to give the kids what's called at Sandberg a pulse survey. We just wanted to get a sense of where they were at. When they came into school, one of the questions that we asked them was, how confident are you about coming into school? And it was just a 3-point scale, with 1 being not confident, 3 being very confident. Surprisingly, what we saw was 94% of our kids were confident. They felt comfortable coming back to school, which was a good, positive step. What we saw when we gave it again at the end of second trimester, so 12 weeks later, is that we had an increase from 94 to 96% of the kids feeling confident. So we still have 4% that we're working on. But really what we really enjoyed is that we had a significant increase in them feeling very confident. So they were feeling good about coming to Sandberg. They were feeling good about being engaged. You can see that the other success that we've had is we've decreased just the amount of struggle in the students academically. 52% overall, we decreased the failure rate, which means should have put that in the positive about how much better they were doing now that I'm thinking about it. Because that would have sounded a lot better. So, and plus that would have been just cooler data to talk about. But anyway, that was one of the things, because we had the kids in our grasp. We could meet with them eyeball to eyeball, have them go to homework club, have them come down for lunch to do help. Not have them, not argue with them about turning on their screen because we know they're not understanding something at home, but actually kneeling down next to them and getting eyeball to eyeball and doing that work with them. So that's just the kudos to our staff and the willingness of the kids to listen and work with us as well as the community connection between home and school. The other piece is we had a nice increase in the amount of students coming out for activities. What we didn't measure here is our clubs, but this does include through winter, up to winter break. So we had a nice increase, almost 100 kids coming out for our competitive athletics or the musical or robotics were the 3 measures. So we're excited by that. This spring, we'll actually do a full survey and see how many of the kids participated in extracurriculars as well. And then the other piece that we're excited about is, even though it's been a challenge, especially if you have a kid on the board who has been quarantined, unfortunately, but we've had a great attendance rate. And I think we still maintain that 98% attendance rate, because you'll see the data from August to December, we had 73 kids that we were working with in quarantine. And in the last 3 weeks, we had 96. So it kind of got a little crazy at Sandberg for making sure those kids stayed connected. But they did. And our tutors, our videographer, our content area specialists have all received emails. And we're very proud that a lot of the kids haven't missed a beat. One of the parents, was an email was just a simple, they had a quiz coming in, we missed that, but then they got an A on the quiz because the tutoring worked. And they knew what the content was because that happened to be the class that they videoed. So we're very happy about that piece. And also just the kudos to our staff, because I think 44% of the certified staff has stepped up to, that's actually higher now because of that increase. This is actually a December number, and I forgot to get it from Mr. Wood. So we're really excited about that. What we want to work on in the future are 2 things based off the Pulse survey. One is that the students are hesitant and they really don't understand how to ask for help, which is, if you think about a 12-year-old, that's common. But now we actually have data on it. So we can kind of go to the kids, guys, this is what you said. So we're designing some lessons about taking care of me that fit into asking for help and advocating. And the second one is there's still a worry, it's not surprising, about making friends and being a friend. So we're working through the social work for some advisory pieces there. So that's where we're at with Sandberg. We're excited, we're pumped up, we're living the code. And next up is MG
I was
and Mrs. Ford.
wondering when you were gonna say you're living the code that hadn't come out yet.
Yeah, it took a little while.
Maybe you weren't living the code anymore. No, just kidding.
Never.
I was kidding. Hi, I'm Tanya Fergus. I'm the principal at Mechanics Grove School. I'm excited to share some of the things that we are celebrating as our successes as well. This is what we presented in the late summer when we talked about setting our goals. So this is something that's already a repeat. And as we go on to the next slide, Anna, thank you. These are some of the things that we've been doing. So one of our parts is something that's been in place now actually for almost a couple of years is our Wolfpack time. And that's the time where we focus on those second step lessons, which is our SEL. Also our Leader in Me lessons, activities, discussions, talking about Lead the Pack. And we're excited about our Wolfpack time because as with teachers here, it's that protected time of the day where that's what you're focusing on is either building a community in your classroom, talking about the community as a whole of the school, going through some of those pieces that sometimes might be tricky to fit in with all of the academic times that we have. We've also had progress with our homebound tutoring and our learning facilitator, as Mr. Pilot has mentioned as well, for our students on quarantine. We've been really happy with some of the increases we've made and changes throughout the year with this learning facilitator coming in and our Zooming with students. And I think we've fine-tuned it, even though, as we've already talked about after winter break, our numbers escalated pretty high, kind of hard to handle, but we're getting back on track and we're figuring it all out. So we're excited. And then also our Lead the Pack tickets. That's something we do for that intrinsic motivation for the kiddos and just good choices that somehow align to our Leading the Pack and our 7 habits. Some of the specific successes that we've had is, and also our data is from before winter break. So as of December 17th, our students who are quarantined also had a very high attendance rate. We had 98.5% of them engaged in their home learning. And the students who weren't, fortunately, we have a great team of teachers who, you know, call out and let us know it's not happening or they can't reach them. We have our parent coordinator, George Moncada, who goes to their home and touches base, makes sure they have the internet, the Wi-Fi, their Chromebook is working, all of that. So we're doing the best we can. I definitely feel that way. And then our staff that are serving as homebound tutors, this has also increased. And I know we've even hired some other staff coming in and some retired teachers, but we had 48% of our teachers already who had stepped up and working with some of the kiddos at home. So that was really exciting. That's kind of how Team MG works. And then our students participating in formal building leadership roles. This is the part that I always get extremely passionate about because as a Leader in Me school, some of you I was able to give a tour to and talk about, we have leadership roles for these kiddos in their classrooms, but then we also have these building wide leadership roles that they apply for, that they get accepted to, and that they carry out throughout the year. Every single year it has increased. We are now at 38% of our students of the entire school participating in a building-wide leadership role. So that could be anything from safety patrol to tour guides. We have building translators, so many roles, and it's a great opportunity for students to have some of those shining moments. Principal assistants help out a lot. I had so many apply, we had to have a couple for each month. So we kind of stagger them through the months. And that's exciting. Each year it has increased. And we've also implemented spirit weeks and days for both students and staff. We did a whole month of Fun October for staff. We now have MG Mondays and we do themed Thursdays and just things to keep up the spirit and the morale in the building and have kind of that little something to look forward to as your week is going on for both kids and staff and principals as well. So, and then thinking ahead to the future. So excuse the typo here. This was supposed to be zones of regulation, not proximal development. So I apologize. I think I made some extra work on Cindy and Laura. So I want to publicly apologize that I had proximal development, but zones of regulation, you're going to hear Mrs. Drake talk a lot about that, but it's something that at MG we're going to be bringing in as well in our classrooms, in our staff time, and all of our communication, and just talking about really regulating our emotions. And it's something that they're starting there and which will make its way up. So we're excited about that. We've worked with Dr. Doug Bolton. He works with SEL, social emotional learning, and he's a great support. He came into the staff meeting with us, and then as admin, I think Jamie's going to mention that, we also had a chance to spend a whole day with him. So really a great time to just discuss and reflect and take that opportunity to focus on yourself. And then we'll be building lessons in to address situations at recess that, you know, continue over time, and really getting staff input as best we can for professional development, for space in the building, for resources, for all our ideas that happen at the school. And then last but not least is just continuing to motivate our students through our Lead the Pack, through our Wolfpack time, through our Lead the Pack tickets, and all of those things that we have in place. So Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Mrs. Drake now.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Stephanie Drake, principal at Washington. You know, I have to say, when I look back on this, like it sort of seemed like a dream as we were planning it. And it's really come to fruition at Washington. We have made our Eagle Hour, that sacred time that you heard Mrs. Fergus refer to, where we can talk about all the emotional, all the behavioral pieces that come into play. And so that was our plan. And then next slide, please, Anna. Thank you. So what progress have we made? Eagle Hour is there every day in every classroom. But we're also implementing the zones of regulation. What the zones of regulation is, it's a research-based SEL curriculum resource that teaches kids to first identify their emotion into 4 zones. You're in the green zone if you're ready to learn, ready to go. The yellow zone, if you're feeling wiggly or worried. Sorry, that's the kindergarten teacher in me. The red zone, if you're angry or frustrated. And the blue zone, if you're sad or sick. And you'll hear kids and teachers at Washington refer to the, wow, really in the yellow zone right now, you know, and that kind of thing. So it's really worked. In addition to it, we teach them strategies and skills to work themselves back to the green zone. Ideally, everybody's in the green zone the whole time. Everybody's ready to learn. Just a couple of the skills. We've all learned how to belly breathe. You'll watch kids do it. It's kind of hysterical when they turn to their teacher and say, Mrs. Jake, take a big belly breath for me. And you think, ooh, that's what I sound like, but that's good. They've also learned how big is the problem. The size of the problem and the size of the reaction have to match. Very fascinating when they start identifying that and then they go, oh, it didn't match, you know, and that kind of thing. So that's a thing. We've also implemented a take a break space. We chose not to call them calm corners because really it's just that time to take a break in every space in our building. Even the gym teacher has one in her room. Kids can use it. We built tools to be in there in that space for the kids to use. They're learning how to use them. Really kind of cool to watch them do it independently now. We've done our second step lessons. We specifically did a set of lessons on bullying to make sure that we taught kids what is bullying and what is not bullying. It's been very beneficial lessons for Washington to be able to address those things and learn about them. And then we've got our Eagle Pride positive reinforcement piece going where they get Eagle Pride tickets. We have stuffed eagles that visit the classrooms for a week. It's a really big deal if your classroom gets the eagle. Sometimes teachers have to say to me, Mrs. Drake, we really need the eagle this week, okay? So maybe there's a little priority going into play there. Some of the successes, the zones of regulation, language that's being used consistently is super cool. And that we're just going to keep building on. We're excited to push it up to MG and work with Mrs. Bennett to push it down to pre-K, which will be awesome. Maybe someday it'll be at the middle school where they can actually go there and identify. But I have to say, here's the other big piece that we didn't know we were going to have is all of this homebound tutoring Zoom links. We have had 95 prior to December 17th. Yes. 95% of our students were engaged in their at-home learning. That's super exciting for us. 21 out of 28 teachers and both administrators have done Zoom links and provided homebound tutoring. Like, it brought back memories of last year, but it was fun to be able to provide that. Teachers are doing it during their plan time, doing it during their lunchtime. They're coming in at 7:30 in the morning to make it work. You know, kudos to the teachers that are just really enjoying it. I will share that I walked into a classroom last week and the teacher says, "You can't stand there, Mrs. Drake." And I was like, okay. And she goes, "We're zooming in." She had 5 kids out. She felt it was easier just to turn on the Zoom link for the whole day and ran with it. And it was really, you know, cool to see. Teacher had done it on her own. So that was a cool success story with it. We too have had Doug Bolton speak. He's coming back next month to teach all the staff about stressors. Because you don't really think about all the things that could be stressors, and he's gonna do that. We're gonna bring our zones of regulations to the parents now, so that they can use it in homes and help with that. So parent newsletters will be coming out on that. And then, just like Mrs. Fergus said, we're gonna put specific rules in place to help with some recess issues we're having. We're going to continue getting staff input on situational and continue building that motivational for expected behaviors. I'm gonna introduce Mrs. Bennett.
She marries me off every time she introduces me, just so you know. So
Sorry, Carol.
That's all right. So hi, I'm Carol Bennett. I'm the Lincoln principal. So I'm happy to be here tonight to share some progress for Lincoln. So this is what we did at in the summer and set us up for the school year. Anna, if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So some of the things that we focused on at Lincoln are the same thing that you've heard across the board. We really focused on back to that restorative restart, really focusing on those areas of self-care for the students. So social emotional learning, even at the little level, is very important. So we have second step lessons that we've been implementing. I'm excited to work with Mrs. Drake on the zones of regulation. That's an exciting piece for us. So those lessons, we have to teach them what an emotion is, and then how they show it and how to control it and those types of things. We get a lot of angry and we use a lot of faces to show that. Especially with our nonverbal kids. So we have to use a lot of pictures and visuals to get them to show what their emotions are so that we can introduce that to them and then how to get their emotions working for them in the correct way. So we've done a lot of work on that. A big piece of that is actually connecting with our parents. So our parent involvement piece at the preschool level is very important to us and kind of goes back to our restorative restart, is that getting those parents involved. So we have spent a lot of time this year with making sure that parents are involved through coming into the classroom for meet and greets, or we've had a parent involvement where they joined us at Lamb's Farm on a day when we brought their kids there. We invited a nutritionist to come and speak with the parents through a Zoom lesson during one of our parent coffee days. So our focus is really on getting those parents involved at that early learning so that they can have a love of school. So that's some of the successes that we had with parents and our focus. And then our team as a whole, we're very small but mighty. We have so many staff over there, but we've really been focusing on our individual students. So that kind of goes back to really making sure that the students are involved. And so we've created, we didn't have progress reports for our preschoolers. So we've created individual student progress reports. And so now parents get a really healthy look at their child at that level on the trimesters. We've also really focused on that in our team meetings. We're focusing on student successes and student concerns so that we're talking about it as a whole team and offering each other solutions. And then along with that, we're focusing on our units of study and how that matches and how that works in some of those times for students and making it work with preschoolers in a COVID time of not being able to play together as much as they normally would. And then again, with that, we really are focusing on during those team meetings, we're also focusing on each other, making sure we're checking in with each other, doing some of that wellness check and some of the items that we talked about in the beginning, but really just checking in and making sure how's it going and making sure that our kids, we've been blessed. I'm going to hit this really hard here, not to have a whole lot of students out. We did get hit after the break, but not as hard as these guys. So I'm going to knock again because I don't want that to come back to haunt me. But we have had our littles there a lot. And so we've been very blessed with that. So our future really is focusing on continuing our units of study. We're really coming together as a team and making sure that we're presenting the same things and getting them ready for kindergarten. And really working with Dr. Cacciatore and Mrs. Unger to make sure we have our libraries updated and some of the things you're going to hear about later from. And then also just really kind of making sure that we're continuing to increase that parent involvement. We really want to make sure that our parents come in, get involved in the district right away, and make sure that they know that they are a part of Mundelein and we are welcoming them up into our building. So I'm going to turn it back over to
Mrs. Drake. So,
Thank you for raising your hand.
Ms. Drake. So, okay, so it's Ms. Bennett. I'm gonna write it in my hands and cheers, make sure I get that right. So our second goal had to do with literacy. We talked about in June that we would be implementing the workshop model. So tonight, what we want to do is take you through a picture walk of what the workshop model looks like. So just to remind you, next, thank you, Anna. The next, this slide identifies the Common Core standard specifically for reading that we're looking at. And next slide, please, Anna. So the first part is, what is the workshop model? So the workshop model is a way to teach literacy, reading, writing, listening, speaking, and possibly a content all in one section in one instructional period. It contains 3 parts. The first part is what we call the whole group instruction time. That would be either an interactive read aloud, which is exactly that. Teacher does the read aloud, stops every few pages, asks some great questions, has the kids talk to each other. And then the second part would be small group time or individual work time. That could be students practicing something on their own. That could be students practicing with a pair. That could be students working small group with a teacher. Assessment occurs through all 3 of these sections. Oh, the third section is the sharing out. Crucial at the end, bring everybody back together, summarize the lesson, or have students share what they learned or did. Assessment occurs through everything. It does follow the I do, we do, you do model, which is teacher does, we all do it together. Now go try it by yourself. And then it includes, really importantly, a strong classroom environment that fosters and promotes the love of reading and writing. And that was our first part of the year, was building that strong classroom environment through classroom libraries, through anchor charts, through talking about books, and all of those things. On the next slide. So here's our picture walk. We have Mary Beth MacArthur modeling a small group instruction lesson at a kidney-shaped table. We have 2 students pair reading, doing it together. We have a little guy working in his writer's or reader's notebook. And we also have Pat Pollock, our consultant, who was modeling what an interactive read aloud looks like. So Mrs. Fergus is going to take you through the next part.
The readers and writers notebooks that you just saw in the picture, we don't know which one that child was using, is a really exciting addition formally to our district K-8 specifically. We've had lots of teachers throughout the years who've had a literacy binder or a journal or something like that, but we've created this common phrase and practice, which is going to help immensely as kids move on, as they become true readers and writers and have a love for it, and most importantly, are thinking as readers and writers. So as we said, K-8 for readers notebooks, we have present. The students personalized their readers and writers notebooks. So it might have looked different as to what it was, a composition book of some sort at each building. But the greatest part you'll see in a minute in the picture is that they personalize it. They've put pictures, they've drawn things, they've gotten words that, explain themselves. And so it becomes their own and they own it. And they grow to really love it and feel that excitement about it. The goal is with our readers notebooks is that students are thinking as they read. We call them readers. We tell them they're thinking as readers and all of that. Eventually, that what they'll be doing in their reader's notebook and what they have started doing at most of the upper grades for sure is doing responding and reacting and reflecting. Those are kind of the key 3 R's. And it could look different down at kindergarten and first grade. It could be a drawing, a picture, a letter they saw that they knew, something like that. All the way up to the middle school where they could be, writing an entire couple pages of a reflection or a deep connection that they're having with something that they've read. We have also the writer's notebooks, and a writer's notebook that the kids are using is more about their inspiration, their ideas, their observations. It's where they're putting some of those thoughts they're having, brainstorming ideas that they could write about, practicing graphic organizers and framing their writing, and then expressing it as well. Sometimes they're doing a free write in there. Sometimes they're using it because they're practicing a true narrative or an informational writing, and they might be starting their first paragraph in there and brainstorming what they could do or fun facts that they have as an expert in their informational writing. Just to explain a little bit about this, because Mr. Pilot's going to get into our artifact review meetings. Dr. Myers was at one with my fifth grade team, and they were talking about their readers' notebooks. And I don't know if he had a true picture. You don't really know it till you see it. And they were talking about how they were helping kids to organize their readers' notebook. They were already at that stage of it where they were giving them strategies like creating a quadrant on one page. And while they're reading something that's fiction, they are breaking the page into different quadrants, like setting, character traits, connections, predictions, inferences, whatever it might be. And it's helping the kids to have a variety of reflections and reactions and responses as they're reading. Because it got to the point, and teachers can probably vouch for this early in the year, where it was becoming like they would stop and they would start jotting about a summary of what they just read, or just a quick thing that this takes place at the park, right? Just a quick like setting. So it's helping them get to that deeper level and really expand on how they're responding and reflecting as readers. So I'm going to turn it over now for Mr. Pilot to talk about our learning walks and these artifact review meetings. Oh, I'm sorry, we forgot about our picture walk. So here you'll see a couple things, and I know it's a little bit farther away for you guys, but these two are showing the kids that they've personalized or are personalizing their writers and readers notebook. This is an example of probably a first or second grade first grade readers notebook, where you can see they have some of their keywords in, and they've also got their illustration going. Here, this is tying in, this is probably their writer's notebook tying into their OG, which is our in Gillingham. So it's the phonics base and learning the sounds and things like that. And then down here, you also see, this is probably kindergarten, am I right? Yep, kindergarten down here is, just the visual, it's just a drawing of what they read. There aren't the words yet, but that's their response or their reflection. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pilot for learning walks and artifact reviews.
Thank you. So our learning walks and artifact review team is an effort to make to engage everyone and keep things consistent at a K-8 level and even into the high school. So I know Dr. Cacciatore also talks with Mrs. Gorman up at MHS about their workshop model and how this all flows, not just K-8, but also K-12. So what we focused on at the beginning of the school year was, as Dr. Drake or Mrs. Drake said, Dr. Drake, well, no, never mind. I'm not gonna, I was thinking Drake, but we'll just stay focused on literacy.
One of his songs?
Yes, that's what I was gonna, yes. I know Sarah knows Drake. I don't necessarily know the lyrics, so maybe Dr. Cacciatore can come up and rap for us. But anyway, we started focusing on the classroom environment, as Mrs. Drake said. And one of the things we wanted to do was get into every classroom every month at each school. And I think it's been interesting at the middle school, because even though this is a literacy focus, a lot of the learning walks also drive into science, social science, math, and related arts as well. So you'll actually see some of the collections, like for an anchor chart, which is an instructional strategy that we train the staff in K-8, just to work with the kids on the we do part of the lesson planning. So we get into the classroom every month, and then what we do is meet with the teachers every month, and there's a focused element that we look at every single month. So like this month, it's questioning strategies. For September and October, it was for August and September, it was the environment. Just, where's the area where kids gather? What is your readers' work? What do your readers' library look like? How's your flexible seating coming along? Because when you think about independent reading and you think about how you read, or when I watched my adolescent girls at home, they would read upside down with their legs on the couch and their butt on the floor, and that's how they would read like this. You don't necessarily do that in school. So we want to create an environment where kids can be readers, and doing it in a hard plastic chair at a desk is not, it's kind of a little weird. So that's what we focused on. If you take a look at the next slide, you can see some of the samples. So for example, when we're talking about anchor charts, you can see some examples. And this is one that they did in science and Force in Motion up at the middle school. You can see that we have them from our dual language classes. You could see greatest common factor and least common factor, and the dots represent, so the teacher created this with the kids. So as Stephanie said, when you talk about assessment drives through this, when you're creating the anchor chart with the students and you're saying, hey, what are different ways we can find least common factor? When the kids don't know the answer as a class, that's an assessment right there. That's the observation. The teacher, something's been missed. They have to go back and review. The nice thing also is it also gives the kids some ownership, because it's not only just listing how you want to solve it, but it's also the dots represent, this teacher said, which one do you find most comfortable to use? Which one is most effective for you? So the kids had some say in it to also demonstrate a little bit deeper in learning. Again, we have some dual language pieces. And then when we got into what Mrs. Drake or Mrs. Fergus was talking about with the reader's notebook and a response, this would be a middle school response from their book, Nowhere Boy. And so each time we come together every month with the teachers, we focus on a certain topic. So 1 month we focused on anchor charts. What does that look like? What does it mean? How do you do assessment? What are you observing for? Another month, we brought back the reader's response. This month, we're actually bringing back a full finished
Written
piece. From draft to, thank you,
You're
from
welcome.
draft to, see, it's happening at all the schools. But it's a full written piece to publication. And we'll talk about that. Then next month, it's going to be conferring. So when the teachers meet with the kids one-to-one, what are you looking for? How do you know they're really reading 30 minutes a night? You know, because I mean, when I was a kid, and you just did your reading log, I was sometimes like, well, my parents knew if I was playing the trumpet or not most of the time, but it was a lot like practicing for band. Hey, Dad, sign this, on Sunday night as I go off to bed. So now what we're engaging the teachers in is conferring with the kids and just asking them questions, doing a little bit of research one-on-one with the kids about how they're reading. It happened naturally in the past. But I think what is cool is this is happening at every school. You can see examples from elementary all the way through middle school in the different subject areas. And it's just providing a consistency and a continuity. So as Laura left the data meeting, hopefully where we want to go is to see an increase. And hopefully, like you'll see the bar, I think it was 16 to 34. Is what the predictive score was for kindergarten. It'd be nice to get to a 42 because of all this work. Whether that happens this year or quickly next year. That's where we're going with all of this. So I think,
There's one more just. with
Is there
specimen
one more?
libraries. Just more pictures.
oh, there's more pictures.
That's
Oh,
just specimen
I-
libraries.
yeah, so these are classroom libraries. You can see just some of how the teachers sort and organize the books. I know at MG, this doesn't happen at the middle school yet, but I know that MG, they have what they call a dump day, I think it's called. And basically, it's
Book
just
dumping.
a book dumping, but basically, it's just every teacher takes their library and has the kids sorted. And that teaches them about genre, it teaches them about collaboration, it teaches them, just all the nuances that readers know as adults that we know. When you say historical fiction, you have a sense of what that is. A third grader doesn't yet. And that's, so when you talk about the genre and you have them sort the book, it takes, an hour or so. It's not crazy. The teacher kind of keeps tabs on it, but then they also have ownership in what they're, or maybe it is crazy.
It's crazy.
We haven't done it at the middle school, but they take ownership in the library and then it's theirs.
It must be a very different experience at middle school.
Yes,
Right.
probably.
The nice part is they know what's,
Yeah.
then they know what is there. They
Right.
know what books they
Yeah.
have access to.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing at the buildings, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Unker, I believe, right? For our Aspire Academy,
Are there any questions?
or any questions?
No questions. I just wanted to say it was a really exciting presentation.
I know, I was
Thank you.
gonna say,
Yeah.
that's so cool. It's
Oh.
super cool.
Well.
We're
thank you.
feeling it too, so thank
Yeah,
you, and I know
yeah.
our teachers are, there's
Yeah.
so many great things happening, and we're excited to see our winter data. It's
Yeah, I
just
think
an exciting time.
it's kudos to you, as the administrators, to the staff, that there's a lot of school districts in the state that there's a lot of complaining and stuff going on, but we seem to be focused on the kids and the families, and I think that's really impressive. really, really impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't do it without your support, so thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
I'm Jill Unger, the Teaching and Learning Coordinator, and I'm gonna give an update on our Aspire Education Academy, a high school course pathway for students interested in becoming future educators. So this began as a partnership with Mundelein High School last year. The idea arose from a common goal to recruit teachers and build a staff that more closely reflects our student diversity and a need for bilingual teachers. This year, we strengthened and maintained our existing clubs, such as the Peer Tutoring and the Educators Rising Club. We created a pathway course progression, which includes a speech course, Introduction to Child Development, Introduction to Teaching, Diversity in Education, and a full year internship with 4 rotations here in District 75. In addition, students are required to take 2 years of a world language, but we're recommending 4 and the state seal of biliteracy. So included in this coursework are 9 college credit hours from the College of Lake County. And next fall, and next school year, our 2 introduction classes will run for the first time, and we have 26 students enrolled. So we have 2 full classes for our first year of implementation. Go ahead to the next slide. So outreach has been key in getting this pathway program started, and we've been very purposeful in order to recruit students. So we presented the program to the Mundelein High School guidance counselors, world language teachers and students, Spanish heritage language students, our BPAC group, so our Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee, and all Carl Sandburg Middle School 8th graders. We've also made sure that all of the outreach materials are in Spanish and English. So currently, we're meeting with several universities in order to secure scholarships for our Aspire Education Pathway graduates. And next year, we will inform and recruit District 75 cooperating teachers to host the internship students beginning in the fall of 2023. So there have been so many benefits to this program, but one that I want to be sure to mention tonight is how it is strengthening the partnership between District 75 and District 120. And personally, I've learned so much about how the high school functions, which will help me to better prepare our students for their high school education and beyond. Where we are. Thank you. Thank you.
So I feel kind of bad. We've had a lot of high energy, and exciting pictures, and
Underestimate yourself, Shane.
all sorts of stuff. And now we're going to talk about the assessment of payroll management software. Yeah. So coming into this school year, HR, we've identified 4 areas of focus. The first was to evaluate the payroll management system that is replicated at both districts. We wanted to find a way to improve the new employee onboarding and orientation program. We wanted to review the standardization of the employee mandatory trainings. And then we wanted to assess the feasibility of creating a classified and confidential employee sick banks. You can go ahead. Oh, you did that already. Okay, good. So in terms of the payroll management automation, we've solicited we solicited shared service stakeholder feedback on the current system to evaluate its strengths, its weaknesses, and additional program needs. And right now we are assessing if it's better to augment our current system or if we should do a hard pivot and select a new program. In terms of new employee onboarding and orientation, between the 1st of July and the 1st of December, District 75 has hired 70 new employees. And so what we wanted to do is find a way to align and improve the efficiency of communicating new employee orientation materials, core materials such as COVID protocols, how to access SDS in their payroll, sick time, if they're in a bargaining unit, what is their contract, those types of things. And so we've been able to create a binder that is provided to the employee, and that binder serves as a complement to the HR self-service website. In terms of the employee mandatory compliance training, every year there are 36 state or federal trainings that every employee has to take regardless of their position. And those can be not only redundant, but time consuming. So we've been able to distill those into a single comprehensive 30-minute program that will occur each fall. And then we follow up for staff that haven't completed that. And then lastly, the classified and confidential sick bank is a work in progress. This was originally thought as a solution after the Families First COVID Relief Act expired. That gave 10 additional, essentially FMLA days to staff who had COVID-related absences. Instead, we created just 10 district-issued COVID leave days, so staff wouldn't have to use their sick leave, and that's worked pretty well. Earlier this week, the governor vetoed legislation that would have granted unlimited sick days for COVID-related absences to staff, but he sent that down with instructions that he would like to see vaccination status attached to that bill. That would complement what we already do. So we do have a safety net in place for staff, and we're just waiting to see if that bill will indeed be passed and signed by the governor. Okay, Dave Zarumba's up next.
Hello, board.
Hi there.
Back in July, we discussed 3 shared services. On the next screen, please. First one is establishing a certified EPA air conditioning person. We did hire somebody after about 8 interviews with 8 different people. We hired a gentleman named Benjamin Lynch. He comes to us from Oak Park River Forest High School, 17 years experience at the school, 25 years experience total in heating and air conditioning. He was a real good pick. Kevin and I really enjoy working with him. He brings a lot to the table. First of all, on savings, labor-wise, he saved us about $5,500 on labor. He saved us about $500 in saving on buying parts through the contacts that he has with the experience that he has. He's completed about 17 tasks on that part of it. He's also done other things. He's inventoried all of our roof fans, numbered them, mapped them out, put all of the motor numbers, belt numbers, things like that, all on a map. So it's easier for us to find them when we need them. We go to the map, roof vent number 2 needs it. We have all the parts right there waiting. Second project he has done for me, or another project, is he's cleaned all of our air handler coils. Also then mapped out and inventoried all of those parts. He's also a good electrician. He's worked with our plumbing company when we installed a couple of new water bottle drinking fountains at Washington over Christmas break. He ran the electricity for that. Second thing we discussed was seal coating. The quote that we got for the school districts was $45,000 to do them all. The unit itself was $24,000. The material and labor was $20,279. That was all overtime pay because we got the equipment so late and we wanted to get our lots done this year. So I'm anticipating next year knocking about 1/3 of that price down on the labor side. That savings on that was $721. Wasn't a lot right now, but in the future, because we own the equipment, we may need paint equipment, it will save us a lot more money. The third bullet point we were talking about was aligning on the custodial services. Kevin Quinn and I have been working with Eric Rogers over at Diamond Lake, trying to bring 3 school districts together. Because of COVID issues, we haven't had a meeting yet, but we are planning it next week. And then we're going to start those discussions so we can get an RFP out for our cleaning crews. So July, when our contract is over, we could then either bring in a new crew or update our contract with this cleaning crew. You guys had a question for me about a board policy, board policy 2.20. On the board policy, it was about a civil defense shelter. We do not have a civil defense shelter.
Look into our policy, we don't even have a policy on it, and a lot of this stuff that I have read was new construction is where it's mandatory. It can bring up a conversation, which I'd like to know from you guys, if it's something you would like us to discuss as a team, to start working on something like this, or making our buildings a safer place for the community. Keep in mind that we do have multiple shelters in the community. The high school is one of them. The village has multiple. So there are some in town. Do you have any questions?
What is that? I'm not familiar with what you're referring to.
In the board policy, it asks for a civil defense shelter. God forbid we have to have, the community needs a safe place to go. Would our building be one of them?
And you're not talking like taking shelter from a tornado
Our buildings are built safe enough now for that. This is for
or other.
yeah, tragedies that could happen.
calamities.
Yes. Is there any questions? Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
I am going to introduce Jamie DeCarlos and Student Services.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to update you tonight. A lot of my update was covered in the awesome principal update, so I'll be kind of brief. It's a little bit, a lot of overlap and commonalities since our staff was working together through these pieces. So the shared service goal between both the high school student services department as well as the our District 75 student services department was to ensure that as we proceeded through the school year, coming back full-time in person from within this pandemic, was to support the social emotional well-being of our stakeholders, so our students, their families, our staff. So I'm just going to provide a little update in some of those areas. Next slide, please. So for our students, in order to best support our students, our staff being, best equipped and having the PD to be able to implement some different supports for our students, we've had, as was mentioned today, we've had some professional development with Dr. Bolton. And really his focus is taking like stress and anxious environments or situations and really funneling that stress in a positive way, understanding our stress, having that control a lot like the zones of regulation and pieces of that nature, and also understanding trauma with our students and all of those components. So he's been instrumental in that, and we've gotten very positive feedback from our staff. And then another professional development to in turn support our students actually began this last week specifically for Carl Sandburg. So for our older staff, our staff that supports our older learners, like that supports our 6th through 8th graders. We had the opportunity to work with Lurie Children's Hospital on a gender diversity training. So that again was also well received, part 1 of a 2-part series. So that's just some of the PD again to help our staff as they're supporting our students. As was mentioned earlier today, we're looking at different ways in classrooms to have either what you could call a calming corner, or like Stephanie said, a take a break area, flexible seating. We're doing an initiative in our ELA classes at the middle school to look at our flexible seating, like what could that look like in a corner. So again, adapting those spaces so that students know they kind of have like a safe space to go kind of take a chill or a deep breath. In the different schools, we've had that ability to do so. And then our awesome counselors, psychologists, social workers, our SEL team has been meeting monthly, every month or every 6 weeks, to kind of review the different themes that are typically required in a school year for us to cover in the schools, as well as just really this wellness initiative that again, the principal touched on our monthly themes. So things like our self-awareness, being a good neighbor, our own self-regulation and things of that nature that again, the principals did a beautiful job covering earlier. So that is some of the ways that we're supporting our students, as well as I know Mark mentioned the surveys, the pulse surveys in his building and other surveys as well throughout the district. So those are some of the student pieces. And the next slide, please, covers some of the staff. So again, this is a little bit repetitive. So again, empowering that empowerment and affirmation for staff through we mentioned the Dr. Bolton PD, as well as we had a really nice opportunity, just as a quick anecdote, on our January 3rd Institute Day. We had a lot of SEL related topics that staff could engage in throughout the day in the choice periods in the afternoon, and then as well as in the morning. For example, at Washington, myself and Michael Crow, our occupational therapist and CPI trainer, were able to provide some de-escalation training to the staff. And then we also had Ryan, Zach, and Luis Berto also provided some additional SEL training with the staff and just working in Kagan strategies and things like that. So we had a lot of great professional development on those SEL pieces, and we're trying to thread that in as often as possible throughout the school year. And then finally, and I believe Tanya mentioned this, the administrative, every year administrators are required to complete an administrator academy. So this year we thought we would plan together and offer that opportunity. So the first day of winter break, the majority of our admin team was able to attend that training with Dr. Bolton. We learned a lot of great strategies and had a lot of great reflection. So that is some of what we've been doing with our staff. And the next slide, please. So just talking about families, we have had a few bilingual parent advisory events this school year so far, and we'll have a few more. In October, we held a parent night on Zoom. There was a session in English and a session in Spanish. Myself and a colleague on healthy routines at home. We are working to create a mid-February to mid-March parent series with some guest speakers in that series. And also talking about like sleeping routines. So for example, Dr. Russo is probably going to be involved in one of those evenings, as well as Dr. Bolton in one night, and then our own staff. So it should be really nice so parents can kind of log on or in person. We're just trying to offer some flexibility as we're planning for those 3 events. Then we've seen a much increased access to our Welcome Center. So as we've spoken to you guys a little bit about in the past, we have the Welcome Center at 1500 West Holly. So I really appreciate everyone's efforts and support in the Welcome Center. And what that is our parent coordinators, as well as our participants in transition have a hand in the Welcome Center, and as well as some of our volunteers have a hand in the Welcome Center. And what that is, it's a place that can be really open anytime, that has clothing, food, school supplies, boots, coats, you name it, for our families. We also kind of have a behind the scenes like network to send emails out if we know a family, for example, has a little one that needs size 3 boots and we don't have any. So we kind of have our whole little network going, and our parent coordinators have been instrumental in that. I just can't say enough great things about, in this pandemic, having the parent outreach support from our team. I thought I'd just pull together some of the different things that they've been doing. So they've been helping with attendance. I think someone earlier mentioned Mr. Moncada will go to the homes. We earlier on in the pandemic were able to provide the hotspots, again, with your support for families that needed that internet. Any type of technology support. We've had, just this month alone, we've had a couple of families since coming back from winter break wondering about just understanding kind of the process to, if I want to keep my child home versus my child coming in because of the COVID spike and things like that. So we just really, having the parent coordinators have those connections and relationships with our families has been, an invaluable piece of working through this pandemic and ensuring that families feel safe, connected, and welcome. And so those are just some of the things we're doing for the families. Any questions for me? I think that was my last one. Okay. Any questions? All right, thank you all. Oh, you do.
I just want to say it was exciting to see that D75 gets to work with Dr. Bolton and Lori Childrens. I had the opportunity to hear Dr. Bolton and Lori Childrens give their presentations over at D120, and they were very, very meaningful and really led to great conversations among the colleagues after those presentations. And so it's really exciting to see that D75 gets to experience that as well.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Bolton has definitely changed the way that I've viewed stress and almost use it as a tool now. And it's very beneficial.
Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Cacciatore. Thanks so much.
Hello. So similar to Jamie mentioning it, I feel like a lot of the things are really all encompassing. And so things that the principals mentioned, the SEL work, our data from Cindy and Laura, it really kind of all ties together in terms of how we're working cohesively to work on our joint literacy goal of reading informational text, which was the plan that Stacy and I shared with you back in July. And in reflecting on tonight and thinking about how far we've come since then in just a short 6-month period, I was thinking about our context for our growth goals and how they came to be. And so if you go to the next one, I actually was really thinking about where our students are at and where they're coming from and how we can support them. And a lot of people will talk about how our kids might be behind or where we've lost learning. And really, it's not that they're behind, it's that they weren't given that opportunity. That, and whether we're looking at the elementary level or even across K-12 nationally and internationally, our students kind of had to put a pause, the same way we put a pause on our own lives as professionals and adults. The students had to put a pause on their learning opportunities. And so as we're doing all of these great things to try and support them and recover some of that lost time, I think it's important to show in all of those great images that the principal shared how much we have been able to accomplish in order to recover some of those lost opportunities. And so I think, if we think about how we're offering more scaffolding opportunities, meaning we're not necessarily giving students the answers, but we're asking guiding questions or offering them supports to help them get to their own set of answers and their own learning, or how we're offering additional SEL supports, or how the Welcome Center has been so needed in this time. I think as we continue to offer this holistic approach to supporting them, we are going to see those improvements in our data. And so I'm super excited, as Cindy and Laura mentioned, to see the results and the fruits of the labor when we get our February scores in. So in July, we said we were going to work on this reading informational text standard across K-12. And I think the most exciting part is, even with this unfinished learning opportunity, our students are demonstrating grade level standards right now as we teach them in our classes today. So even though in that previous chart, it shows how, they might be 2 or 3 grade levels locally, nationally, or internationally, we still have these high expectations for them now, and they're achieving those goals. And so those are the images that I have to demonstrate in the next slide. The first one was a kindergarten example, and this would be that idea of with prompting and support, which is the expectation at the kindergarten level, that on the left side of the anchor chart, it's the teachers writing. And then on the right side down here, you can see where the students are starting to take ownership of that and engage in that anchor chart. And the next one, it's second grade, and it's actually a math class, and they're explaining their thinking orally. So Anna's gonna do her tech magic. And
I think it's 38. Very good. And then would you like to share your strategy? Yeah. Okay, how did you do it? So I took 1 away from the 9, put it on the 29, made it 30, and then there would still be 8 left over from the 9. So then you add the 8 to the 30, and that would be very good. Excellent. So he took 1 from here and gave it to the 29 to make it 30. This is now 8. 8 plus 30 equals. Very good.
so whether we're talking about math instruction, literacy instruction, the next example is 3rd grade. And here we have a student who was able to pictorially represent the key details of the story that he had read in class. And with a lot of great detail, one of the lessons in our literacy unit is, quick sketching versus some sketching versus detailed work. And usually in your first draft, you don't put eyelashes and fingernails and cute decorations on your outfits, right? You just got to get your image down. But here, as soon as you can see it, you'll see how this student was able to put in some of those key details, not only in relationship to the story he had just read, but key details in the images that he was drawing. And there you go. Oh, that's 5th grade, but that's okay too. We'll go there. So see, look at all those great details. And he's got color, or she, shouldn't be gender specific. I'm so sorry. There's some text bubbles there. And so this was a way that this particular student was able to demonstrate how they were explicitly referring to the text. In the 5th grade sample, which is the next one. Thanks. Okay, so here again, using the anchor charts, but now you can see that next level of the development as we started with the kindergarten example, where it was some pictures or a few key words on the child's Post-it note. Now in 5th grade, they're having a lot more evidence provided on their Post-it to really explain their thinking. They're quoting the text, they're giving more explicit details. And when Stacy and I were going over this presentation, because the 120 was also sharing the follow-up, she said, you know, I have to be honest, Sarah, I just didn't think you were going to be able to have these little kids provide evidence of their thinking. She goes, I really didn't. She goes, I'm a high school person and you said you could do it, but I didn't think you coid do it. I was like, well, thank you for that vote of confidence, my friend. It's been a pleasure working with you. And then she said, no, she goes, this is really cool. She goes, I can totally see it. This is exciting. And I said, of course it's exciting. They're learning. Can't believe you doubted us. Shame on you. So we had our own little chuckle as we were talking about it, but I think this just, what's neat for me to see and for her to see and hopefully for you to see is the progression of that and how you can take that one standard and show it at all of these different academic levels. The next couple examples are 7th grade. Here is a science example where based on the teacher prompt, the student had to craft a pretty thoughtful and extended response in terms of providing their own claim, evidence, and reasoning, which is the language that the high school uses. And so we've now transitioned from some of those identifying key details and citing multiple text types to using the language that they'll experience when they're freshmen. The next one is more of a table style where they have to identify in the boxes their claim, their evidence, and their reasoning, which is really a supporting of the analysis. This is what all of our informational text expectations are. We do this at work every day, and the students should be able to start working on that. Well, now they're working on it as young as kindergarten, but here's a great example of a 7th grade. And then the last one is an example in a 7th grade ELA and social studies, where we were combining our literacy skills with our informational text content. The last slide is just a quick overview of some of our meeting opportunities that in addition to, as the principals described, the art meetings that they've been running, the team meetings they've been having at their grade level building. We've also been having articulation meetings with the high school where our 8th grade teacher representative, in some cases our 7th grade teacher representative, is able to meet with the high school department chairs and our teaching and learning coordinators to make sure that we are keeping that tight alignment in terms of the academic vocabulary and the expectations we have as we transition. And Stacy and I continue to meet to talk about how we can continue this partnership and expand into other areas. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much. I'm now going to pass it off to T. Thank you.
Okay, if we could go to the next slide. Good evening. Back in July, we came to you, the Board of Education, with a few things that we wanted to discuss as it related to the business office. One was our business office goal statement, our short range goals, the reinstatement of an admin assistant, a Medicaid specialist and grant writer position, as well as measurables for our goals. If you go to the next slide. So the way these slides are organized is that on the left, you'll see what was presented back in July, and on the right, we're providing an update. So back in July, we said that we were going to be supporting our district-wide educational initiatives and student learning. Since that time, we worked with teaching and learning to incorporate key positions. An example would be our director of linguistics into the ESSER grant. That's just one of the things we've done. Additionally, we're having monthly meetings that are being held on a regular basis between us and teaching and learning, as well as special education, to review our district resources as a whole, as well as their direct budgets, and make sure that we're using them all to the most benefit for our student learning. Go to the next slide. We said that we were going to also maintain sustainable staffing levels. So currently, we've been working with the building principals and other key administrators to start the staffing process for FY23. In fact, we're having another meeting tomorrow on that. And that is just one of the ways that we're looking at our staffing levels and making sure that they're sustainable and in alignment with our learning objectives. Go to the next slide. We said we would have sustainable expenditure levels and increases. So a couple of the things that we've done, we have worked with District 120 and District 76 on a joint custodial contract, which I believe Mr. Zaremba spoke about earlier. And this should provide us some significant cost savings just in overhead alone. We've also are partnering with them to do a waste removal bid. And lastly, we're in the midst of negotiations with the Board of Education and NIA. We go to the next slide. The last goal that we had said that we would maintain balanced budgets, and we have presented and continue to present balanced budgets to the Board of Education. If we go to the next slide. So our short range goals, there are two of them that we've highlighted in this section that we're going to talk about. One is challenge the traditional methods of operation. And two would be to create and promote an atmosphere that is welcoming and engaging for our parents, staff, community, and other individuals that we are in contact with. So one of the, I guess, most innovative things that we've been thinking about and working on, we're currently working on, is the idea of meeting as a joint governmental unit. So not just District 75, not just District 120, but meet as an entire governmental unit with the village, hopefully, the park district, the library, the elementary district, and the high school, to look at our levies as a whole and how we can potentially even those levies out. So for example, we have our bond schedule. Our bond schedule can go up and down depending on when our bond payments are made. That can cause a fluctuation in taxes. If our schedule in a year is staying flat and we decide to abate some bonds to give our taxpayers some relief, but the high school has bonds that happen to go up that year, what we have done is in essence canceled each other out and not provided what we were trying to provide to our taxpayers as a whole. So we are currently, or we're going to be meeting as a group to see if we can maybe get together, look at not only our bond structure, but our levies as a whole to try to even that impact out and provide a large benefit, hopefully, to our taxpayers. So that is a very innovative way, innovative thing that we're thinking about. And this will also provide that environment, hopefully, that's more welcoming and engaging for our community. They're going to be hopefully happier that their tax bills will be more of an even playing field. So if we go to the next slide. Promote responsible resource allocation. The FY23 budget will be brought to the board in May or June. Currently, that is being prepared, and we're hoping to present a draft of the FY23 budget at the Finance Committee meeting in February. Additionally, we are in the process of updating our 5-year financial plan and those projections so that we can present that to the Board of Education at next month's meeting. So we're very busy in the finance department on a lot of initiatives and a lot of exciting things coming our way. If you go to the next slide. So we asked for the reinstatement of the admin assistant. This has been a significant improvement and actually ties to some of our other goals about the engaging and the welcoming community and atmosphere. Bringing back this position has provided improved customer service with our bilingual community, as our new receptionist is bilingual. It's providing enhanced support for our registration process. We have implemented a new purchasing and receiving management for a lot of our literacy texts that we're receiving and logging and getting back out to the teachers. And lastly, it has provided the ability to reassign some of the duties to provide more direct assistance to the business office, to teaching and learning, and to the Director of Linguistics. So we're very excited. This has gone very well and is proving to be a great asset for the business office and the district as a whole. Our Medicaid grant specialist that we are looking to hire, we still have not filled this position. Some of it may be due to the pay range. We are still looking at that pay range to be sure that we're in the right area for that. We also believe that it may be an issue of a lot of times school districts are cyclical, so people start to look for positions around February, March, April, May, and June for that next calendar year. So we're hoping to attract some people here in the coming months. We have not gone down in our Medicaid per student. We are doing our best to maximize those claims with the limited people and knowledge that we have. Again, that specialist will be able to get us to that $2,000 per student threshold that we're looking to reach. But until that time, we have been working also on things like the federal grants. If we go to the next slide. Yes, we have applied for and received a $530,000 federal grant for safety upgrades for the district. That's coming to us. We're going to have to put forward about $130,000 of matching funds, and the federal government will provide us $400,000. And this has to be spent over 3 years. But this is an example of the staff going out and doing their best to fill in until we have this position filled. So we're very excited about that opportunity. Go to the next slide. That is it. Does anyone have any questions? I know I speak fast.
Thank you, T.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you guys are leaving as soon as I get up? Killing me.
Why did you so quietly? Sorry, bye.
You know how your popular already is.
I know, it's all right, I don't blame them. And anybody else, any of the team members? I know you got your students coming back in early tomorrow, so principals, anybody needs to leave, please go. Now. Don't wait, it's okay. For the board, I'd like to be able to make sure everybody understands, and I guess I look at right now, this Kevin and Al, because you started on the journey of shared services. And as I was sitting back there and listening, if somebody would have told me 3 years ago that we would have been at this spot, even if we weren't with a pandemic, I still don't know if I'd have been able to tell you 3 years ago that, yeah, I think this is where we could be.
Thank you. It's been a great journey so far.
Yeah.
Really working well.
So, I mean, really, to me, when you think about that, that really, to me, signifies it is about your admin, it's about your community, it's about your teachers, all working together within this process. And I can just say thank you to the team for doing that. I thank you as a board for allowing us this opportunity to do this, because when I start looking at it, and what I hope you heard tonight, and the takeaway is the alignment that's happening amongst our principals, not only within our own district at 75, but how it's transferring also with 120. So our students are getting a very similar experience along with our families. You start talking about our assistant soups of teaching and learning, talking with one another, and what is actually working and going on, and how it's opening eyes, which you heard tonight from 120, like, oh, that's how that's happening. That's creating more partnerships than what we've been used to having with one another. And to me, that is the whole intent of why we initially got into shared services. I think the side benefit of it is it's some of the savings that we're able to reallocate for our educational programming. But more importantly, what's happening is you're seeing partnerships develop that is having a systemic difference, making it in our community. You just heard T say, we're looking at being able to get the village, the park district, District 120, 75, and the township library together to look at our levy and bond structure. Ladies and gentlemen, that doesn't happen. So this venture is making great moves, and just want to make sure we understand where we're at with that, at least from you get my perspective on that. I know tonight was a lot about the qualitative data piece. You saw a lot of the living moments of really how our students are able to share with you what they're learning. We're starting to get in place more of the data piece, the quantitative, to where that's going to drive a lot more of our decision making also. as we refine it for ourselves, because I was thinking there, Orton Gillingham, I think we're in year 2. Botanists and Pennell, we're in year 1. We're going into a literacy program, we're in year 2. We got a new math book adoption that we're just starting in year 1. And you think about all this stuff that we're doing new, and here's where we are. And to me, that's impressive. So I hope that's what you heard tonight, and we look forward to being able to provide the end of the year summary for you come June or July.
I know when the shared services was first brought up from the 120 side, there were some board members at that point that weren't real sure about doing something like that. And were a little bit resistant, but fortunately, it's gone in the right direction. And, you know, between the two districts, I think it's really worked out.
I was just gonna add that a couple of things you talked about, like the, or some of the bullet points of what the reason for doing it, like alignment was a big one. I remember we sort of said, you know, how are we gonna, with the personnel in both districts, like how is that gonna happen? Are we gonna like, and some people in the districts thought they were gonna lose their job, and we were like, no, we're gonna do it by attrition. Oh my gosh, we had no idea then that word was gonna have such a huge impact, and all these, like every couple of months, we have another opportunity for this shared services position. That's just something that we just had no idea that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what you're talking about, it's like stuff that we thought this was gonna be a good thing, and it's stuff we never even realized was gonna happen. Like you just talked about Stacy talking, you know, with Sarah about her. It's just incredible to see.
Can I throw out there, just wondering if since the IASB is calling for us, calling for districts to propose items to talk about, is that something, and I think it's due in March, so I don't know if that's something we have any interest in looking into, you know, speaking on, or having, you know, some people present on as a topic, since it's not something that all districts do, but that many may want to consider, especially as different different bills keep coming down, trying to argue for consolidation and things like that. I think that it provides an opportunity to teach other districts some other options that might still be fiscally responsible and alternatives to merely just merging districts.
Sure. Because I think that there's confusion for people. They think that shared services sometimes is consolidation, and it's really not. It's not. It's just trying to put resources together so that you're saving some money and other things.
Yeah.
Just see what the, and again, I apologize because I've not yet gone to one because NCAA stuff is going on at that weekend. But how long are you expected to present? Like, is it a 50-minute segment and then you maybe structure your presentation? I can imagine different formats, but
Right, from
you know,
what I can see, it looks like you put out, there's like an application. I looked at it very briefly. I didn't delve into it. There's an application to basically propose topics and what you could do. Then they have a committee that meets and decides if you will be one of the bigger presenters. And if not, they may put you as the table rounds talk so that you can do a small,
big
they can
meeting
decide.
venue or time. You're like,
I think IASB would decide, you know, whether they want you to give a really big talk or just give us the highlights and handouts and people can walk around and do that. It would kind of be up to that. So it would be a collaborative effort to try to figure out what we would want to. And that's why I'm throwing it out there. I'm not saying we have to do it or anything else. I'm just wondering if there would be any interest. I certainly don't want to add things to everybody's plate. It might be that we table it this year and consider it next year, and that's totally fine.
personally, I'd love to hang out or help out and work with whoever wants to do it, but I know I have one more year. I probably, if the timing is the same, that I would personally be able to help. And even though I love it.
I think it's something to think about. At least.
And I think, I mean, I was thinking about it in terms of when Dr. Castro was talking and saying, you know, like, oh, I talked to, you know, Stacy. And so, I mean, I think that that's a good opportunity. And since some of the slides you've got in here may already be able to be used, like, here's a way that we have aligned the standards across K through 12, where most districts here in Illinois are used to dealing with either K through 8 or 9 through 12, not both. And here's an example. And we all learned something in the process. because that's an opportunity where it doesn't have to be two board members speaking for an hour or whatever. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
you know, you'd
there's-
have the superintendent, you'd have the assistant super, you know,
There's
giving an
natural
example.
categories, staffing, you
Right.
know.
Payroll and
Payrolling,
HR.
buildings,
Yeah.
the curriculum alignment, I mean.
I would think that could
Would be
easily be one of the
easy.
bigger talks, because you could have multiple people give their perspective and how this worked and whatever, but it might be something we do later down the road when we have a little more, when we can stand up and say, we got the village and this and all together and look what we did, you know, maybe that's a later comment, and that's okay.
So I know there's interest because ironically enough, when we did a similar report 2 weeks ago, similar discussion came up with what to do. So what I would do is go back and say, okay, team, what do we want to look at being able to do? I know the application itself isn't lengthy. So they're really just looking for really a summary of what you'd want to be able to talk about, and then they give you the thumbs up or down. I mean, the presentations themselves, typically it's either the round table or it's roughly the hour to 90 minutes. When you think about how we've structured even our board meetings, the presentations, Chris, like you said, a lot of stuff we could take and probably transfer into a single document for a presentation. So certainly, so I'll reach out and see what we think, and if we would like, and get somebody to put together what we want to be able to do on our end, and then what we would look to do is say, for you, we'd need board members from a board member's perspective, right? What was your role as we went through this?
And it would probably be D122 and 75.
I would look- yes.
Together,
I
so
would
that
look to
there
have
would
both.
be like a
Yeah.
team,
Yeah, you'd want.
Yeah, you'd have,
You know.
yes.
so that would be something, maybe you can find out if they have no interest, that's okay too, then we don't need to push any further.
Yeah.
But just,
Well, can you apply and then, you know, I'm sure
Approach.
there's a drop dead where you have to commit, and then if it
Right.
doesn't work out, fine, if it does, then.
You just tell 120 that if they're not interested, then we're dropping shared service.
Okay,
or we're just gonna speak on their behalf, no, I'm just kidding. I was just throwing it out there only because it's the end of January, and if it's due in March, this gives us a little time, if it's something we want, and again, I'm not pushing it, we can certainly put it off and do
See what
it
their board thinks.
later too, but just throwing it out there,
The application is due in March,
I believe so,
and this is for the,
the fall. the
November.
November.
okay, the triple I.
yes, sir.
Awesome.
Because this way they can start putting together,
Yeah.
like, okay, we have these topics, and you can see, if you go through like the booklet, you can see all those roundtable discussions and
Yeah.
stuff. There, that seems to be from what I looked at briefly was, you submit this, we'll let you know, and if not, you might be considered one of the carousel topics or whatever, so.
I think that's a great way for us to share our knowledge and experiences with this, endeavor, but it's also a great way to learn more about it by trying to teach it to somebody else.
Mhm.
Sure, we would get great questions that would even help us learn and grow.
Well, typically what you see also are the school districts that are either thinking about it or are in a shared service model, they'll attend too. Because they want to try to learn what you're doing, and what ends up happening is you end up developing a connection there, right? You can start sharing more ideas as you go through the process as well.
Well, as I recall, when we were finalizing everything and getting to some of that, I remember we looked at a couple of different contracts like that had and whatever. So it's not as though it's completely unique, but we can say, here's what, we looked at some different models and we came up with this and we tweaked it, whatever. I mean, it's
So I
You know,
will look
it's-
into it.
attendees, you all, those that have gone can, say, it's not that someone may sit there for the whole 90 minutes to an hour. Maybe they come by, get the materials and leave. But it could open up the conversation to reach out and have other superintendents reach out or other boards reach out and try to get ideas of what can be done. Just a thought.
So the next item is actually a follow-up for the board. These are the items here that we have are topics that were discussed at the December meeting about possible things you'd want to come back together as a group. So we wanted to allow some time for you as a board to go through these items to see how you'd like to best approach them. The items that we brought back were the book study, which was brought up about the art of school boarding, which all of you have your own copy there for you. So what you brought up before was possibly doing a book study where however you want to formulate, everybody reads a chapter, and then you come back to board meeting and discuss it, or everybody takes a chapter and shares the summary with the group. That's one of the things that you'd want to be able to discuss. With that first one, there are 14 chapters. 15th chapter really isn't something that has a lot of meat to it. So I'd say you're really looking at 14 chapters. I'll briefly go through what I remember from the meeting and have for my notes, and then you can take them from one topic to the next and decide how you'd like to best approach it, okay? The second item that you brought up as a board was incorporating the code of conduct for a board member. That was in your packet. There are 12 items for the code of conduct, and the discussion around there focused on bringing that back as a topic every month and being able to go through one of those conducts. And it's just really setting up a structure of how you'd like to do that as a board. So it's discussed as being part of an agenda item. The third item was brought up, and it was also came back from, I believe, III. After public comment, there was a discussion by the board saying maybe put a board comment section afterwards to where that allowed the board to discuss that of anything that was just heard in public comment amongst yourselves. And then that way, the person that had provided the public comment would at least be able to know whatever discussion took place here. And that you as a board, if you needed to give direction to me of what you wanted me to do with that public comment piece, they'd be able to at least hear that right then and there. So it wasn't so dry, I guess, or cut off after they say come and they walk away. It was part of the thought process between there. And then the last item for you to discuss is steps that you'd want to take towards with the board mentoring program. And with having that implemented, looking back at your policy and formalizing it so that you know what we have going forward with supporting board members as they come on to the board. So that's my reference from what I have. So if you like, pick them in the order you want.
So how about if I start?
Sure.
Because there's been a lot of discussion that's occurred since the last board meeting, either directly or indirectly. So starting with the book, The Art of School Boarding. And one of the things they point out in there, and I agree with, school boarding is an art. And one of the things that we look at and that we need to start talking about is the big picture, getting back to basics. Where are we starting from and where are we going? If we use this book as the foundation that we want to start to build off of, because what we need to do is we've got to get to a place where we're all on the same page. And that means only that we all have the same understanding, that we all share the definitions of, you know, the one that keeps coming up is micromanaging. What is micromanaging and how is it defined? Well, it's defined throughout the book in different chapters in different places. So the book hits on leadership, but it hits on vision, and that's another thing that I want to mention. Moral standards, relationship building. Another word that we kept talking about all through the month was trust. What does that mean? Policy development, the law, ethics, educational support, setting expectations, and the chain of command. So if we all read the book, and it's what I would propose is that we all read, say for next month, the first 8 chapters, and the next month, the second 8 chapters or whatever. Because if we get the foundation in place, using the book as the foundation, and start building off of that, we can start moving a little quicker. Because the follow-up to what I'm proposing or suggesting here is, we talked about briefly about a strategic plan or the goals, the mission statement, the vision statement. You know, what does that look like? And is it in place? And if it's not in place, we need to get something in place. And how do we establish that? And part of it is the next one of these things that we're talking about is that every voice matters. So how do we get input from everybody? You know, do we want to start talking about community surveys? Do we want to talk about getting roundtable meetings with the community? There's a lot of things that we need to start talking about. Because in essence, we're a brand new board. And we have an opportunity to start not only getting back to basics, but looking where we're going to the future. And that's followed up on the third point, which is really I think the most important one, is the monitoring of everything. How are we looking at and keeping track of what we're doing? is this really what we want? And I'm gonna use an example, about monitoring. I'll give you two examples because they're both, I think, pretty important. One of the discussions that we had through the dialogues was, well, how do we evaluate performance appraisal for the superintendent? How does the board do that? Do we wait one time at the end of a year and we all sit down and say, well, you know, you're doing a good job? Or so what's it based on? That he came to work and he had a brand new suit on and he really looked good? Or are we basing it on solid criteria that the superintendent understands what that criteria is? We understand what it is. He can't be walking around in the dark for a year trying to figure out if he's on the right track and if he's doing what we want to be doing. So right on point with that, and I'm going to mention this too, and I'm actually going to hand this out, because in the code of conduct, number 12, number 12 point talks about monitoring. I will strive to keep my board focused on its primary work of clarifying the district purpose, direction and goals, and monitoring district performance. So when is the last time and how do we look at, what does this look like, performance appraisal for the superintendent? Now, should we meet with them on a quarterly basis and have a discussion? Should we all write down something? But here's what comes up. And you two guys, Al and Kevin, you were involved with the shared resources. One of the things that happened out of the shared resources, this is from May, the discussion started in 2018. It was finalized and the declaration was put in place in January of 2019. So how many of this board, other than you two, know that? And part of that declaration is the performance criteria evaluation of the superintendent is included in there. And it lists out what the criteria is. So if we're talking about monitoring and monitoring that's going to be appropriate, should we not be looking at something that was put in place in 2019 and ask ourselves, is this still good? Or should we look at, are we getting the information that we need? You know, what does this look like? I mean, it's time to start picking this stuff up and looking at it and making sure that we're up to date where we should be and how we're going to start and continue to move forward. Another example I want to give you came up in the discussions. One of the members of the board mentioned through an indirect conversation that there were a pile of desks behind the school. And the question was, well, what are those desks doing there? Why is this and why is that? A question came up, but it was like in the middle of the year, as I understand it. So here's what another suggestion that we should consider is, why would a question of that magnitude come up in the middle of the year? These should all be information that we have on the front end. So T mentions tonight that we're getting ready for May and June to start the new budget year. So looking at a first place to start on what our plan should look like, what we should be anticipating. How about if we do what most businesses and organizations do and have budget hearings and put budget hearing process in place where we meet with the principals face to face and they talk to us about what their budget is and what they're looking to do from each one of the buildings. And then we have an opportunity to have a dialogue with them and have an interaction about what those dollars are, where they're going, why do they need this, a justification process, if you will. But the key to that philosophy is once we all vote on that budget presentation and the budget that's submitted, once that's approved by us, that's a signal to them, to the administration, the principals, the schools. You now have the authority to make those purchases. You have the authority to spend that money. It's been approved. Now move forward and now let us move on to something else. So when T puts out those reports that she puts out on a monthly basis, and there's questions about, well, what does all of this mean? What are all these dollars? Where does this come from? Now we'll know from the beginning where all those dollars, revenues, expenditures, where all this is, what all this means as we go through each month. Now we know where those dollars came from. We know where those dollars are being expended, and we know what's being purchased. So we're all on the same page, and now we're working with an understanding of this is how we should be doing business. And once we finish the budget part of it, and once we get through, and at some point, I think we need to share the declaration.
Okay.
And if that's possible, to the board, so you all have an opportunity to read it. Because it follows right along with what the earlier conversations were tonight with Al and Kevin. I mean, Kevin and Al, you were both on the committee that did it. And we just had a discussion about it, but you two knew what you were talking about. But the other, how many other is 5, don't have any idea what you're talking about. So those are the kinds of things that I think are very important and that we've got to start to move forward with and get things that are put in place. One of the things that I think was very significant, one of the comments that were made at that conference is the community gives us 2 things. They give us their kids and they give us their money. Now stop and think about that. That's a hell of a responsibility that's on us. And we need to start looking at it and understanding what we're doing with the kids. We heard a lot of what we're doing with the kids tonight. But the other part of it is the dollar. We're good stewards of the community's money. So I think this is a really significant opportunity for us to start being the change agents and building the future of what is going to be happening in the district and how we're going to be able to accomplish that. I also put together all of my notes and that follow on these 3 points. The setting of the goals, all the voices matter, and monitoring how and what should we be monitoring. Because if something's in place that was done in 2018, if we're monitoring this, is this still the information that we need? Is this still what we expect is going to happen? Or should we be looking at it? The policy things that we're going through right now. Is every 5 years? How often we should be looking at and evaluating policy? One of the policies that I was reading through had to do with the superintendent's performance appraisal. And there's even a section in the policy that mandates that we monitor and that there's a monitoring process in place to ensure that we're all on the same page and that what's happening in the district is what should be happening, what the guidance that we put down as a board is being followed and being adhered to. And if it's not, then we need to tweak it or adjust it and start moving forward. So that's the other thing I think we need to have a conversation about is the policies. And what kind of mentioned the last time too. Some way, I know there's some now that have to be done because there's been legislative changes that were made. But I don't know that waiting every 5 years to change our policies is going to keep us in a good position. So how, what does it look like in terms of how do we make adjustments to be able to monitor policies? And one of the things that I had mentioned, and it's just out there again, to start the conversation, you know, is of each, I think what was it, 179 policies that we each take some and be responsible for them, and it's up to us then to review them and stay abreast of what's happening on it. And share that with the rest of the board too. And even going back to the mentoring one that Dr. Myers mentioned, there's some of them that you and I talked to Lisa, and I got a copy of yours too with what they are. But there's some, even just a word change, because there's one in there about the mentoring that says the president may request a veteran
Yeah,
board
so
member.
the
to be the
veteran
mentor.
Yeah, and the policy packet that Christie kindly put together, yeah, we had the key action
Yeah.
items, and then there was just all, you saw it, the whole laundry list just from this press review
Right.
that warranted just discussion or tweaking or education about. So I
Yeah.
like the idea, Ray, of coming back up, because like all of the things that were mentioned about you know, the mentoring, you know, the, do we have a board comment section? These are chipping away at things that are bigger. So I like the idea of not taking little things down here and acting on them, but getting back, like you said, to the basics. And I'm up for reading half the book in a month.
Well, I think reading the book too, and if you read and then having some discussion on it, because people interpret things differently.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you have a discussion, you can try to at least get on the same page. Yeah. Or
And
close
one-
to it
One
anyway.
thing I was actually thinking about this morning was how could we have conversations? So piggybacking off the idea that Christie brought about having board public comment, what if we built in a section of just called, you know, school boarding, and then this is the time in the meeting, and maybe we allocate 45 minutes every meeting to, you know, starting that discussion about these broader, bigger topics. The budget, how do we do policy?
Yeah.
Just school boarding. And I kind of came up with that phrase with Kevin on Friday about just calling it school boarding, how we can do it. That was my.
One just last point I make is where it says the president may request. If we're gonna have a solid policy in place in terms of mentoring and have a welcoming environment for new board members that are coming in the future, should may be changed to shall, you know, so that if we're gonna do it, then let's do it.
Well, so as far as the policy stuff goes, press 108 being a separate issue, because that's why I wanted to break that out, and that's what I was trying to say at the last meeting is, I think they're both important, but I do think that we need to separate the press 108
Right.
stuff from the general policy discussion
Right.
and school boarding discussion, because while they're interrelated, there are two separate
Right.
issues. So I think we need to try to track it down with how do we want to, and that's what the administration is looking for us from, you know, from us too. How do we want to implement all of these ideas? And so I think Lisa is saying, do we want to, you know, kind of add a bullet point, you know, or a Roman numeral on the agenda to make sure that we are focusing on something each time, and that may mean giving some homework to initially going through this book. And then that may transition to, okay, if one of the things we want to do is make sure that we are all well versed in the policies and that we may need to update and bring those together. And while Lisa and I were going through the press 108 stuff, that's why I separated that out and made some notes. I didn't expect those to, you know, need to get into them, because I did read, and I pointed a few things out to Dr. Myers as well, is there's a lot of things that need to probably be updated and tweaked, but we wanted to, for tonight's purpose, separate the 108 from that. But you're not wrong that we need to take a look at that. But I think we kind of need to prioritize. They're all important, but we obviously can't spend hours and hours at every meeting going through all of this. But we kind of need to prioritize what order we want to do that in. It sounds like from what you were saying, you want to have us get some of this stuff in order so that we can assist with the development of the goals for the budget, because that will be coming up, because they are, that's being crafted. And also in setting like a strategic plan from a board perspective. I think those are both very important. I will endeavor to do whatever homework you guys put on, but I do want to step back and just remind everybody that we are kind of in the middle of some really big extra stuff, meaning the policy creation that we need to wrap up, and we're almost done on the equity policy. We're getting there. We're not almost done, but we are far in that process. That is taking a lot of time outside of the normal stuff for some members, as well as the contract negotiations, which is taking up a lot of time outside of stuff. So just be mindful of, I will do whatever I can, and I want to be involved, and I will do my best. I don't want to hold anybody up, but just putting that out there.
How often are you guys meeting on negotiations? Twice a week?
Twice a week, every other week.
Okay.
For now.
So why don't we start, I put taking into consideration what you're saying, that we're gonna do the first 8 chapters, and whatever you can do,
Right.
you can, but that shouldn't preclude us then from,
No.
and you would still be able to participate in the
Sure.
dialogue and get some stuff out and get moving with it, so that we've at least got the book covered in the next 2 months, which puts us right in front of then if we move into doing the budget hearings.
Yep.
And that could be our starting point with the budget, because that could be a dry run about how we're gonna do everything else in the future, how we go through that.
Can I ask, just because I don't remember the board, or the calendar of events for the year, don't we have because we brought up one of those issues, the superintendent, is that usually in February that we do that? Or March?
Yeah, usually we do the eval in February. Usually
Okay,
try
so
to
that will
be
be
by March.
coming up, and I know there is a tool that you had created, or somebody had, you guys had created.
No, Tom actually created it.
Oh, we met, okay,
No, Tom Klink.
okay.
And then last year when we evaluated Kevin, I tweaked it to
I
sort of
remember
better
you.
reflect
The
the
goals.
declaration, Kevin's goals, and then I added, because of COVID, I added the thing about COVID.
Right, and then that's where Lisa was saying we had talked about whether we want to tweak that further to, rather than just doing it once a year, like you're saying, maybe do something else. So I just wanted to, I knew that was coming up, but I couldn't quite remember if it was February or whatever. So I know that that is something that's on the horizon, but maybe we need to be forward thinking and how we're going to do it for the next year, as opposed to
Right.
switching
And
gears.
even looking at, well, like you're saying, we're tweaking it. We should have that tweaking going on. Like for what's gonna be happening next year. not-
That's why I said forward thinking. I agree with you.
Yes.
Right,
So
for next
that
year.
everybody is on board. It's very clear and crisp. This is where we're going. And I know what's expected of me and what's expected of you. It avoids a lot of problems, and it's like, okay, now I know where I'm supposed to be going. You can't have a superintendent walking around in the dark, trying to feel his way around and make sure I'm doing what you guys want me to do. And if we met even on a quarterly basis, and it doesn't have to be a 4-hour meeting, but just a half hour. What's going on, what's this, is this still applicable for you and for the district? So we have a dialogue that's ongoing, and not just meeting once a year and saying, you screwed that up, and it happened 9 months ago, but we never said anything to you about it.
And I think that's what comes into play was if we are reviewing and possibly amending policies as we go along, that would be one that we might want to move to the top of the priority list to get done, so that it's done in advance of next school year, so it's not too surprise, fiscal year, whatever. So I don't disagree with you, but I think that perhaps if we're making that a goal as a group, we need to have somebody take a look at all of the policies and maybe put a hierarchy in place as to which ones we should focus on first, because some of them are more time sensitive than others. And I think some of them, we would all, going through and looking at some of the policies when we were doing that, I think we could all agree certain things need to be changed. And Lisa and I had some questions as we went through on some of them and talked through some of them. We may have initially thought needed to be changed, but then we've talked through some reasons why maybe they shouldn't. And those are for discussions we should all have, but it's a question of still, how do we want to do that? Are we all on board with what Lisa was saying with perhaps setting aside part of our meeting to focus on this so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle and we don't, forget that, or?
Well, even if we do, at least the same, but go back to what you're saying too, that there's a priority of these, so we're not trying to go through 100.
Well, right, there's like a sub.
Here's 600 pages, go. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think anybody wants to add board meetings, right, or special committee meetings to their schedule.
At least not until these other two.
So I don't know.
Then we can get on. board.
Eric, did you have any ideas about
Well, I just,
how to build that into our current structure, but yet? Because I think, like we've discussed in the past, that the addition of that question and the answer document was very helpful, because then everybody could see it versus just some. But it's also limiting because tone and, it
Right.
just doesn't come across
Yeah.
sometimes the right
To
way.
further tweak. And that's,
What- I really like the idea of kind of using the book to start to get back to the basics. Because even as we talk about suggestions on how to do this or making tweaks to one system, still a little unclear to me on why a tweak or a change to a system would be beneficial. I feel like, kind of using this book to get back to the basics is a way that we can build a foundation to be able to collaborate better, to talk about those decisions, because we're just more knowledgeable on our purpose and what our roles are.
I totally agree.
I'll be honest, sometimes I feel like I'm a little subjective up here just because I'm not clear on how my decisions reflect a goal or a policy that we have in place. So again, I really like the idea of using the book to kind of get back to the basics and build that foundation that we need so that we can collaborate.
And and this is where you're both right, that it would be beneficial for us to have more of a formal mentoring program in place, because all of us could have benefited from it at whatever point in time. Because I remember one of the former board members who's not here anymore saying to us, like the day we were sworn in, it takes about a year until you really feel like you kind of know what you're doing, because you got to get through the full calendar year. You see, okay, we do this, and we start talking about this and the budget, and then it starts to be cyclical, and you start to, okay, now I see and do that. So, and that's where some topics come up, and I go, I know we do that, but tell me exactly where the calendar that falls again. But until you can see a full year of that, it's hard to do that. But that's a good idea for something that should be then in a mentoring program, so that, we
I
can
think
help.
Ray's point about I think it was in the notes section from a meeting about the desks or whatever it was. I don't remember, but anyway, but we would know because it's in the budget that we're replacing X amount of furniture at Carl Sandburg. I don't think we know with any amount of specificity what we're doing. I know they bring stuff to us, like, oh, we gotta do the boilers and the roofing, so
Right.
that's usually there, but I think it could be better, the clarity around what all
So
our
you'll
goals.
know what the requests are and what. Even the boiler would be discussed at those hearings too. They would come back and say, we're gonna spend this amount of money on the boiler. And that would move forward. So we wouldn't be sitting here trying to decide what the color of the boiler is. I mean,
No.
It's, here's the money, go buy the boiler,
I like blue.
So I think this, in listening and needing to go through a hearing, right, there's already a natural process to have a budget hearing where we do those. I think setting up the structure with what's the information the board would want to have towards the budget. Because the budget to me is a great example of, we could go really far down a rabbit hole in the budget. Because I'll just take the desk, for example. We annually upgrade classrooms. It's just something that's normally in our budget every year. It might be a bunch of desks one year that we're taking out of classrooms, the other, it might be a bunch of tables. That's just an example. What I don't want to, I prefer we stay away from, I don't want to have Dave come up here and tell you, okay, we've got this many pencil sharpeners, this many desks coming out of these rooms that are being redone. I'd rather be able to say, every year we attempt to renovate 3 to 4 classrooms in a building. The approximate cost is this.
That's I think
That's what,
appropriate.
I
Okay.
think that's appropriate, and I could say, I recall, I'm the one that brought it, and I'm not calling anybody out. I'm the one that brought up the question of the desk, and the reason why I can recall my thought process as to why I did that. I remember seeing, because I do look at and not everyone does, and that's okay. I do, just because I'm curious, look at the bills statement, and I remember seeing that particular month, like, I don't know, I think it was like $12,000 was spent on desk. And then I saw a whole pile of what looked to me by driving by in the drop pickup line to be, and I was just wondering, I go, that didn't quite make sense. I was asking the question, I certainly wasn't demanding something or doing, it was
No.
just,
But
help me
You're not
understand.
taking it that way,
No, I
Christine,
know,
no.
and I'm
Yeah.
saying also to the other board members who may not have, that's just, but
But you know.
you're not wrong
it's
to
a
say
very
that if we
important
knew.
Time to make a point. Because somebody says something or somebody asks a question, nobody should be interpreting that as that's a criticism or, you know, that it's a bad thing. That dialogue is gonna make us successful. If we can't have a dialogue, we're not gonna make it, you know, and so just because somebody asked a question or said something, nobody should take that as a negative or a criticism of them. It's just the dialogue, part of how we're trying to move forward.
And if nobody asks a question, if you didn't ask a question about the desk, but then you have 2 or 3 community members that come and go,
Right.
hey, I saw a pile of desks out there. What the heck's going on? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, at least we can have the answer.
Well, believe me, and again, I think those of us who either have kids in the district or know people who have kids in the district get a special kind of question almost every week. But I think we've gotten really good at going, I don't know, that's not
Refer
my
to the chain
lane,
of
here's the
command.
process. So, you know,
And I hear you, and I wasn't taking it as a criticism, I was just using that example to say, and to answer Dr. Myers' question, what information do you want from the board? I think what you just described, Dr. Myers, would make sense, just to say, this is our general practice and policy, because then it would be understood, you know, oh, okay, here, I saw, you know, $94,000 on literacy materials. I didn't question that because I know that's part of what we're doing and part of the goals that we are setting to do that because it's been discussed. So
but again, I
that's-
take ownership for a question I asked, why are we buying, it was a few months ago, why are we buying textbooks on a program that we're not using anymore? I'm not sure we ever got the answer, but
that's
and
the checks
again,
and
maybe it
balances,
was
but-
like, oh, well, you didn't realize that it was for this. Oh, okay, you know, but we don't know because we didn't have that general
Right.
line item of what we were expecting to spend on, what do you call it, curriculum materials.
Moving to what I think is a much easier, one of the bullet points that Dr. Myers brought up. From IASB, I did bring up the issue of the board of public comment. I think that is an important, and again, you know, time right after public comment to add that. Keeping in mind, it may not even be a direct response to a public comment that was made. It might be just used as an opportunity to say, for example, hey, just in case anyone doesn't realize, the Frozen musical is coming up in 2 weeks. If anyone wants tickets, now is a good time. You know, our district, the middle schoolers have put a really hard, you know, into that or something. It might be something totally innocuous, nothing to do with just giving
But
each of us
again, I
an
think
opportunity.
it's a way of getting at a broader topic, which is how do we interact with the community? How do we interact with each other? So again, it's a very good example and I sign up to do it right now, but I think it's just one of many things that we should talk about doing.
I
And
think just a point that I would make, I'm sorry, Aldo.
With the board comment part though, and it can be a very fine line to walk because it depends, and I think you would need to get some legal advice as to what you could talk about and what you can't, because you could open up a really big can of worms that could cause a lot of trouble. You know, the general stuff, like you just mentioned, there's a thing of this, but responding to what a citizen had to say, you're gonna have to be very careful.
I agree, and I think that that would probably be something to, we don't have to implement it next month, but to think about. But I think, I agree that we would all have to have kind of rules behind that of what you can and can't do, because we all need to be mindful of the code of conduct and everything else. And I certainly don't mean for us to do it as an opportunity to make it a two-way, like, you know, we don't want to get any
Sure.
fights or arguments. But I do feel like when people come, who do come to meetings, it's usually because they have a complaint. And one of the biggest complaints that then you see when people complain about it after the fact is nobody listens, they didn't hear me, they don't understand. If that wasn't on the agenda, we're not allowed to talk about it. We can't address you. We can't, that doesn't mean we didn't hear you. That doesn't mean that we didn't put it on an agenda in the future, but just to say, thank you, you know, we appreciate things bringing to your attention. We'll look into that. Just enough, you know, that may be
You
it.
really don't want to run into a dialogue with them either, you know, and,
But that's why we can.
That's why it
talk
would be a
about it. Do we
separate
wanna
line
have
item. It wouldn't
town halls, do we want to have coffee chats?
and you'd also need
like-
to kind of limit the amount of time that you spend on it. You know, we give them a certain amount of time.
Certainly.
We shouldn't take
Give an hour.
advantage of it.
No, I get it. I agree.
And I think there's been times in the past where we wanted to thank people too, but it was like 10 o'clock at night,
Yeah.
President's Prerogative, and like, who heard it, you know?
And to be perfectly honest, just like our public comment, often we have it, it's on the agenda. No, okay, it doesn't mean we all have to speak.
Sure.
There could be many months where, nope, does anyone have anything? All right, moving on. I don't intend for this to take another line item. I just liked the idea, knowing that some other boards are doing it. I thought it was an interesting thing to explore. But you're right that there has to be rules in place and we have to plan that out, but that could be one of the things we consider as part of the others, but.
And I think it's,
I personally-
again, we're talking about how to shuffle things up or how to energize. I don't know what the right word is, but not, we don't have to stick with what we have. We can tweak it because we're a new board. And that's
So want to be mindful for where we are right now. So just time wise, I know we start to fizzle around 10. It's 9:12. We still need to make sure we prioritize what you're wanting to do from this list and be able to just have, how do you want to go after it? With what you want on there. So there are a couple items that still have, I don't have my master list with me, but that could have action items. I think we need to be able to decide, Kevin, does the board want to take action on any of those items with implementing them? Or are we waiting on it?
Well, let me just ask a couple of clarifying questions, because I'm just curious. I sort of like the idea about what Lisa talked about maybe spending 45 minutes on school boarding. So if I guess what I first wanted to ask is, would everyone be okay with spending 45 minutes on school boarding?
Just start with a half hour and tweak
Yeah,
it,
I would go with
you
that.
know, I just threw it out there.
Okay, well, I thought it was a reasonable amount of time, so that's why I was
Well,
asking. Okay,
I
so
did too, but
So
it's
is
not-
would everyone be okay if we did a motion later, said we're gonna spend 30 minutes a meeting on school board? Okay. So then my second question would be is, does everyone feel like the art of school boarding book is the place to start and not the code of conduct?
I wouldn't know.
It is a nice book. I've started reading. It's a pretty light read. It's easy to get through. I do feel like we could get through this first 7 chapters next month, no problem. I kind of see we could do them at the same
Yeah,
time.
Well, I would say, let's
Because
see
they're
what the
two
book has to
different
say, and then you
things.
can look at the code of conduct.
Okay.
after that
All right, so,
and see how it relates.
all right, so in the action items that I'm gonna say, we're gonna spend 30 minutes on school boarding, and at the February meeting, we're gonna talk about the first 7 chapters of the art of school boarding book. Is that reasonable to everyone? Okay. And then after we get done with the school boarding book in theory in March, then we could move on to talking about the code of conduct. Does that seem like it'll address what we want to do with that?
Because by that time, then we'll be through the book and know how things in the book might relate to the code of conduct.
Right.
And
Then
I
the oth-
think people could bring it up if some, you know, if chapter 2 is a natural tie into something and it triggers a thought and Al wants to talk about it on the code, I don't see why we have to draw.
We're all bound by it when we took the oath, whether or not we're talking about it as an item or
I got
not.
much choice
So
on
I
that
think
one.
they go together as the school boarding idea,
Yes,
but yes,
that's, I guess, my,
yes, yeah.
thank you,
And then,
clarifying
no,
myself.
we sort of were trying to be cognizant of time at this meeting, so we didn't actually put the Board of Education comment section on the agenda. Because we thought, Lisa and Kevin, I thought we could talk about it a little bit depending on how much time, and then, but I think I heard tonight that people feel like that maybe we need some rules in order to figure out what that would be. So Kevin, how would you suggest we go about doing that?
Well, I guess it'd probably be during the school boarding time that you allocate it.
No, I'm saying, how do we come up with the rules for that?
For the,
particular thing?
if we do the comment.
The
board
comments,
comment,
board comments.
rather than like citizen comment.
So I think well, off the top of my head, I think you gotta mirror kind of what you can do after the public comment with the interaction. And then I think define what you're wanting it to be. that time period. And then if you got questions, I'd say, let's connect you with the school attorney to find out what are some of the limitations you may have as a board.
I propose we start with the school boarding thing that we're doing.
No, that's what we're gonna do, because that's an action item.
Right,
The comment is not an action item tonight. I'm just trying to get an idea about what we need to do in order to make it an action item,
Eventually.
an action, in a
Kristen,
meeting
just
down the road.
did your whoever you talked to, did you get their information? Maybe
I wrote it down, I'm sure I can
follow-up
find it.
call or?
Yep. I have it written down, so
With them
I
just
know I
to
have
see
a
what
district,
their-
so I'm sure I can find it.
What their rules were, and I think I understand
Yeah,
their.
I don't mind
intent.
following up with him to see if I can get more details. I know he said it immediately followed their public comment. They weren't using it to directly direct, hey, citizen ABC, I'm saying this, that they just gave an opportunity that in case anyone just in general wanted to, thank you, everybody who came out to talk tonight. You gave us a lot of stuff to think about, and we'll get back, we will, hope to put things on future agendas that address that, or we'll work with the administration to see how that might fit into a future agenda, or, the frozen musical is coming up, whatever. I mean, it was just an opportunity for any of the board, want to say anything, gave them a chance. It wasn't a big formal thing. It wasn't a big thing, but I liked the idea of it
'Cause I
just being a
remember
way to talk.
Back, it was, I think it was before there was a statewide mask mandate, we had people talking and blah, blah, blah. And I just remember, Kevin, you weren't here, so I was like stepping in and I was like, I was very unsure if I could turn around and ask Kevin Myers, like, hey, can you get back to them? Was that even an appropriate thing to say? So. And I think the way it played out is he kind of said, I'll get, the woman was like, yeah, I'll email him. And we're like, oh, okay, but it even felt awkward for me then, like not knowing how much I could engage with the person, just to say, please give him an email and he'll respond.
Why don't I try to see if I can reach out to the board member, and then we can discuss it at our school boarding thing next month, not as an action item, whether or not we want to then set up something with the attorney to ask our questions so that perhaps we can implement it on a future.
Well, I was gonna say, can you contact this person,
Yeah.
and get some information,
Yes.
give it to me,
Mhm.
and I will look at it, and then I will talk to Kevin about trying to get to the
Okay.
attorney to see if there's anything we need to be careful of,
Mhm.
like what I was talking about, and then we can sort of go from there.
Okay,
Because I'll take that on, because you're busy enough with all the stuff you're already doing, so.
okay, no problem.
I had another question. Oh, I really wanted to know, Eric, Ray, maybe Freddie too. Did you guys not get a copy of the declaration when you started on the board? The shared services declaration?
It is in the binder that we got.
Okay, I just want to make sure. I thought,
And I think we
One
went
of-
over it with that joint meeting, with D120,
Okay.
didn't they share?
one of the reasons we did the declaration was when we got to this point, when you were talking before about it was Al and I, and Christie and Lisa were kind of part of it.
We were
It was like,
observers.
it was at the very end of the whole process. We did that so that we had this document that we could hand to future board members to say, this is what we went through, this is what we came up with, we wanted you to know the history of it, so, okay, I just wanted to make sure. I felt like that you got a copy, but I just wanted to make sure, okay.
I will point out that I think that that's part of when we're discussing at future school boarding sections, how to deal with the mentoring program, since we don't have new boards who will be mentoring immediately. I do think that it might make sense because it seems that the last few years, we swear in the new members and then we do a joint meeting with 120 and do this whole reflection. I think it might make sense to do our own board meeting first and do a little bit more onboarding with our board before we immediately meet with the other. I feel like, because I know that was super confusing for me my first year, and I even felt that was confusing this last time with brand new board members and sitting and then I almost just feel like we needed to have one meeting in between that before we do a joint meeting that way.
Just so you know, part of the reason for the joint meeting is that we're now bound by a certain day period to swear in new board members after the election.
Yep.
So I think we were just trying to do that to make it easier to get everyone sworn in before time elapsed, I guess. Is the case may be.
And that's one of the things that was approved in the resolutions, is they're trying to change that to extend that a little bit so that you don't have to have a special meeting in order
Yeah,
to do that.
exactly.
I just meant as far as our board versus 120 and meeting together, it's almost like we needed a D75 grouping meeting before we immediately jumped
School
into a
board
joint,
meeting.
yeah.
Right.
But that's just a
And,
thing, but we can discuss it.
and it's interesting that I didn't think of this, and you said that out loud, is that it's gonna be a period of time before we have to mentor new board members. So I think we spend time on this and we sort of get our house in order about where we're going and everything. And then maybe
Till
in the
next spring.
future,
Yeah.
we talk about, all right, now that we got this all, we know where we're going and everything, what do we see the mentoring process look like? I think that's the way to go with that. That was something that we had talked about also, that we would discuss it and maybe not make a decision tonight or act on it.
You know, the policy committee, we can keep notes as we're going along, you know, if we have relevant pieces that we might want to throw in there, we can.
And that's what I was
That
starting
comes
the
out of this.
conversation with, which what got put in there.
Okay, anything else about the art, the District 75 art of school boarding? Okay,
We're gonna do the first 7 chapters then for the next.
yeah, and that'll come up in a motion in a little bit.
Can I ask a question about motions? So just basically, why do we have to have a motion that we're gonna go read this? I guess is my question. I can see having a motion maybe that we want to add something to our permanent agenda, but why do we have to have a motion? And I'm not saying you should, I'm just asking. What makes a motion? And maybe that's in here. I don't know.
What makes a motion? I don't know.
Well, I would say that because it's on our agenda as an action item, it's the action we're taking. Like, we have agreed as a board to follow up on this by doing this, and this is what we resolved. That way the minutes for next time are gonna reflect, this is what we did with that information.
This
We
is so-
agreed to go through it.
This is so that everyone that votes yes in that motion has to read the.
Okay.
Yep.
Lisa,
It's the board speaking in one voice. It goes
Yeah.
back to the very basic premise of when the board's deciding to do something, they're committing to it. It had, my theory is it goes to you as a vote. And that's what says yay or nay to it.
And if
Okay.
it's 6-1, then that one person is gonna be on record as saying, I don't wanna have to read this. But they made me anyway.
It'll be a quiz.
Kevin, anything else from the superintendent's report?
The last one we have is the update from Lisa and Christie on Press 108.
So, now that my computer has turned off, hold on. I only really intended for us to need to go through that first one page because the other pages were sort of extraneous to be determined later, once we get to a policy review of each section. But you can, if you took a look at the
This one, Christie.
Oh, yes.
yeah, but I wanted to take a look, go through, okay, so, we generally, because to go back, a little bit, this Press 108 is the biggest one that they've ever done, so they're not always this big. And part of this is because they had a bigger committee kind of go through and do a deep dive, because there were so many legislative changes in the last few years that they wanted to make sure it was all up to date and that, we're all there. So a lot of the things that are added are really not anything that we generally felt like we were recommending that all of the changes they were asking for be adopted as presented, with the exception of the few that are there. And when I say with the exception, it's not because we disagreed with what they were saying, but because these particular policies had required questions that as a board, we'd have to answer one way or another so that when it gets implemented, the right language gets put in. So if you looked at the full document with regard to policy 660, which is curriculum content, it was long and there were lots of changes. For the most part, and clearly we as a policy committee are not suggesting that we should change any of the standards changes that they're putting in there, because those are all legislative changes of, now that you have to do this, you've got to teach this. We're not changing any of that. The only issue was there was an option, because some boards may decide not to. It said, do you offer an anti-bias education and intergroup conflict resolution? And the federal law specifically had those two on one line item, not one or the other. It was, do you offer this and this? And we had to answer yes. The default answer was yes, or we had to say no. It's not specifically required by the new law. But elements can be, we asked, do we have one? Because this is not something that, we readily knew about. The answer we got from the administration was no, except we don't have a formal education on this, but certainly elements that are in these standards are already being taught in a number of different formats. It doesn't require that we do this. It says that that we may offer it down the road. And so we were suggesting that we answer that, the default answer. So that gives us the flexibility to later, if we wanted to specifically adopt that language, we could, but we would, by answering yes, we would not be required to suddenly change how we're doing things. The other issue with that was there was a big federal change in the standards for sex education curriculum. There was, so the NSES, and we can look it up and tell you exactly what that stands for, but it's the new federal law that has been passed. It was the federal law that was passed, put it immediately into effect and repealed the old one. And currently in our district, we are teaching the standards of the old one. However, in some districts across the state have decided not to teach it at all, either, even the old one. So there were a number of questions. There were, I think, 5 or 6 different options presented as questions that we then had to answer in the affirmative. Do we follow the NSES and the last one was no, but there were a number of different options like, yes, we do, but we don't want to have to say so, or we will, but we won't, there were a number of different things. The thing to keep in mind, and what we wanted to tell the board is, because the federal law put it into immediate effect, Illinois standards have not yet been developed for what that's supposed to look like as far as Illinois standards that would, I imagine, down the road, go back into the curriculum content. So those are not due to be drafted or put out until August. So at this point in time, because we don't have Illinois standards on it yet, we have to answer that we know we don't have it because we don't presently have it because it hasn't been adopted yet. So that would eliminate options 1 through 4 at this time, because we can't say in the affirmative that yes, we do NSES. So we were suggesting that we have to select option 5, which I typed in there. The board either does not offer NSES or offers NSES but does not want to communicate that in this policy. But the board does offer developmentally appropriate consent education curriculum and wants to communicate that in this policy. I felt like that was the only one that really applied at this time, understanding that once the Illinois standards are adopted in August, we will probably come back and change it, because I imagine we will probably implement that within our curriculum and then change that policy because it will change at that time. So it's not as though we are opting to change really anything that we're doing or defy a law or be innovative in any way of what we're doing. We just, until those standards get adopted, we can't say we follow the federal standards. There's no Illinois standards on those federal standards just yet.
And IASB acknowledged that this was going to be an issue for
Right.
most
And
districts.
They basically said consult with your board attorney. That was the answer. So in reading the 5 options, that's what I felt was best, because it doesn't communicate that, we just don't teach this as a district. That's not what we're saying. But we just can't answer in the affirmative. Yes, we do this, because until Illinois adopts those standards, we can't say that we haven't.
Any questions on that?
That's right, on that particular one.
Thank you, Chrissy, for leading through that.
The other one that had a question was in student appearance. There was an addition to say whether you wanted to expand the language to say that you wouldn't be allowing a dress code that would discriminate on the basis of like ethnic hair and some other things. You could say, and it was, I think it was race and something. The expanded language to say, or any other protected classes under board policy 710, equal educational opportunities, which then would go into religion, gender, all the different classes that are protected. We felt like it made more sense to be more inclusive and include all the protected classes rather than limiting it just to our dress code based on the racial and ethnic hair points, and it wouldn't actually change anything that we're doing in practice. It doesn't ultimately change anything, but we felt that the expanded language is more reflective of our community and what we want to put out there. 190 student behavior. All of the policy on this talks about cell phones not being distractions, by students or in the classroom. The question was whether or not we wanted to require that cell phones be out of sight. And we asked, what is the current practice in the district? And it is not that they not be out of sight, because I think sometimes teachers do actually ask them to use them for certain things or make it optional for some stuff. So because that is not a current practice of the district, we didn't feel it was necessary to implement in the policy that we want them to have to be out of sight. Nobody is disagreeing that they're not distractions, because that's already in the policy. In the section on student records, we were recommending one change, only that it seemed inconsistent that particular provision did not identify who our district's official records custodian was, like many of the other policies where they say, if you want to, discuss harassment, contact, this is the person for the district to contact or do this. I just felt like and brought it up just to be internally consistent with all of the others, since it requires us to identify, or have a records custodian, and that the superintendent designate one. I felt it made more sense to just be consistent with our other policies and name it in the policy who that is. In prior practice, when we might have staff changes or whatever else, we've updated the policy to say, okay, now instead of, former staff member, we've updated it to say who it is. So we weren't looking to ultimately change anything other than just propose that we say District 75's official records custodian is so-and-so with contact information.
It's Patty. We'd include it. We wouldn't have to update the policy if it ever changed. If Patty wasn't doing it as the principals or whatever, we could insert the principal's name because we're not changing the policy.
Right.
So we would be able to include the name.
And when I say change it, I only mean in terms of the posting it on the website where, families or whoever is looking at it would see that.
Mhm.
So ultimately, we are generally in favor of adopting as presented IASB policy 108. We do have to move on this essentially because this is the second final reading and because it has to be done before March, because the next press policy will come out. Hopefully will be substantially shorter than this and go through that. And I imagine some of these, like we said, will be updated as it comes down, but that doesn't mean we can't, as a board, go through and review certain things and decide to update as we undertake a policy review. I don't think we need to discuss all of these other ones tonight because these were more just intended to be a working document for us to come back and discuss later. And I would think that if all of you undertook, and we don't need to vote on it tonight, but undertook a homework event to look at our website and go through all of the policies that we have, or take one every so often and look through it, you will probably all come up with, hey, why do we have this? Why do we do this? That's what I think ultimately, when we get down to it, when we come down to like tweaking and updating our policies, I think that would be important for us to perhaps break it down in the future by, hey, this time we're going to look at, policy categories 1 and 2 or whatever.
We could piggyback back off of press. So we
Right.
have a laundry list of policies now that to look at if you're so inclined, and we can decide going forward.
Right.
Do we want to tackle these first? Kind of here and yes, kind of here and no. We don't have to really address the onboarding process in the next few months, but we will probably,
Right.
At some point.
I would say my recommendation would be that we start with this book that we're gonna do, and then we can discuss action steps in the
After,
future,
yeah.
once we have.
Oh,
a
yeah,
little-
I'm just saying, this,
No, I know.
this could be one approach,
Yep.
rather than taking all of policies under section 5. We
Right.
could take, we
Start
could
with
come at it in a different way, and that'll be for future discussion.
Do we, put dates on the policies have been changed?
Yeah.
Yes,
The policy?
Yeah.
and that's part of what
Press.
this Press Plus, because we have a service, so let me step back and say, We used to just get this press memo document that was like that flyer that had like a summary of all the changes. And then it was up to the press policy, or I'm sorry, the policy committee to go through and implement that and say, hey, should we do this and do that? A couple of years ago, they did as a board decide to pay and become,
We did.
I think it was very, well, it was-
Early on,
yes,
yeah.
I think it was one of the first things we did when we were sworn in, is that we voted on it to say, yes, let's do that. There is a cost for that per year, however, it's significantly, once they switched over, because I think it used to be a big Google Doc with all of our policies on the website. Now, I mean, we all know how much I love Google Docs. But the, now it's this service, if you look at the policy section on the website of the Board of Education tab on the website, that you can get to from all of the school websites. There's been a lot of discussion on that, that you can see that it's a much more bookmarked thing, and that's basically because we subscribe to this Press Plus service. When we make these changes and we did this spreadsheet that then we give to Anna, and then once we vote on it tonight and do it this way, she will go through and implement it, and by her click, 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 all of the places, it will automatically go through and update all of our policies without, oh, well, we forgot to make this one strike through change and do that, which saves Anna significant time and
So
resources.
all those pages
And
and
it's
pages and pages with the green highlights and that all came out of the system that we subscribed to. That used to be a manual process.
Oh.
It was awful.
So with these particular things on the spreadsheet, when we say adopt as ISB presented, adopt as presented, but adopt as presented with these edits, and I suggested a couple of these edits, then she has to go through and say, okay, with edits, and then just puts the edits in and boom, boom, and it'll
It's
do it all.
instantly updated.
So if we answer no on this one question, it'll automatically take some of the language out, or it'll put language in. It keeps us more in compliance with what we have voted for, so that we're, there's less mistakes, there's less. So I mean, the amount of money we pay for it is well worth it, considering the time it saves Anna from having to go through and do it. And it's actually just more efficient, so that when we go through the policy and say, hey, we'd like to amend policy, whatever, and make it say this, she would just have to go through, make that edit, and it would.
And that's something I think Eric brought up too, that we could be the best documenter of how to do it. But I think your point was, it's really instructive just to sit with somebody once if you really want to do it, because that's how I kind of learned from Wells. It was like, I don't get this. I just don't get, even have a phone call, so that's again, part of the onboarding too, but there is a learning curve. But that's an excellent point. And that's why we can build all this feedback into the onboarding thing, let alone just helping each other normally.
Yeah, and I appreciate your guidance on how to get started on that. It was very helpful.
Well, again, it was only took you so far, and then we need the interaction to take it.
So our recommendation would be that we pass the press 108 with these few edits that I just went through.
Sounds good.
None of them being big and record, policy setting on our own right. We're just trying to implement.
Okay. All right.
That'll be it.
We're ready for committee updates. I'm going to assume that was the board policy committee update.
There you go.
I hope so.
Thank you. The policies this month are so big, they're on the agenda twice.
Right.
Next one, committee update is finance advisory,
We have our next meeting February 15th.
February 15th.
Yep. So we'll have a update at the February. Or right before.
Okay, great. All right, next is representative updates. First is the STEAM Foundation.
I have nothing to report because I was at the contract negotiations at their last board meeting. So I know that they are looking to, I know, not, can't zoom into that one from here. That they are looking to, and I think they pushed it off a little bit further, I can't remember the, I think it's Young Scholars, but the mentoring
Oh, was it, the STEM?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called, but they're looking to, they decided to put it off just a little bit farther, only because they know that because it requires teachers referring some kids and assisting with the application, they didn't want to add any more stress to the teacher's plate right now, with everybody being incredibly stressed out coming back and all of the COVID changes and all of the staff changes and all the pressure being put up. They didn't want to add anything else to anybody's plate. We decided to, they decided to push it off just a little bit further. So we're still going to do it. We're just pushing it back a couple months, which we all agreed was a good. In emails that preceded the meeting that I didn't attend, but that we all agreed that that was a good plan. So that's all there is update right now.
Okay. Next is CEDAW.
CEDAW, I don't have much of an update. Superintendent just sent out a report today on an update on their enrollment and staffing. They continue to struggle. The combination of decreased enrollment and staff vacancies continues to result in capping and limited enrollment. They're trying to not do that if necessary. The next exec board meeting is this week on the 27th, so I'll be able to report on that in the next meeting.
Okay, great. Community outreach village liaison.
I don't really have anything for the liaison, but I did want to mention, I actually brought a copy of something. The new 2022 Statement of Economic Interest. There's been significant changes that make no sense whatsoever. So.
Not unusual.
We'll have to do that, I think, coming up in May, I believe, for everybody.
It's due by May 1st, but because they changed it, and they're asking for the interpretation of a lot of personal information. Got an attorney impression of it. Basically, it's like wait, because they're going to have to clarify what all this means. Because the initial thing makes it look like they're asking for all your finances and everything else. And it's all they were trying to do was, because we deal with the people's money, what are our interests, the parallel to what the community interests are. So they're going to give you more information as it comes up. I'll keep you guys posted. The other thing I'm going to mention, did everybody get a copy of this letter from the state representative, Dia?
Yeah.
Oh, I brought it tonight too.
Yes.
'cause I was-
Yeah, I don't know. You got T, would you get?
I have not received any.
Basically, he's trying to change the bidding. The laws of the bids that you know, become bound by the low bidder, that there's ways to get around it.
Well, I think they probably sent it to the board members. The board probably didn't send it. Yes, you can, I mean, thank you.
Or wait, I'll take a picture of it.
Okay, so, Kevin,
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Yeah. And of the last week.
Okay, then the last one is equity committee.
the meeting last night?
No, last
Last
week,
Last Monday.
yeah. So,
You want me to?
yeah, why don't you?
So-
Chrissy's just been in charge. this
It's been a
last
busy
month.
month. So the week before the meeting, we had a posted working meeting where 4 of us attended in order to plan for the meeting that included our committee members on last Monday. And we established what we wanted sort of as the agenda. Unfortunately, due to illness and work things, 2 of us then weren't able to attend. So only 2 of us were at the committee meeting with the board. But we did have a very good discussion with the community members. We tried to keep it on topic with kind of the agenda, the things that we had talked about at our pre-meeting. I think that there was a lot of dialogue. There was a lot of good information sharing and exchanging. There were some differences of opinions, but it was very respectful. Where it ended up at the end was we essentially had gone through the written feedback we got from each of the committee members and to all of the different options that we had put out there for different other samples of either board policies or statements, because not all of them were policies, some of them were more statements, and elicited feedback for what people specifically liked, what were their favorite ones, what did they not like, and there was a strong preference for number 3, which is Mundelein High School's equity policy. So we expressed that it was not a democratic process such that we were asking them to vote on what they want or didn't want in there, and that we were going to take their feedback back to our the board members who will be drafting it, and then it would have to come back to the full board for voting. So we got a lot of good feedback. We did discuss some stuff, and where we left it at the end, because we didn't quite get into the definitions of what definitions we wanted to see and what ones were missing. I know that we have another committee meeting scheduled for February. Lisa and I were discussing whether we have 2 options. We could either have the 4 of us or anybody who wanted to, we could schedule another board meeting and not ask the committee members to attend before the next board meeting in February, so that we can kind of go over in greater detail some of the feedback and some of the things that we were given, since 2 of you weren't able to go, and have us start trying to put that into a draft form to consider. And then we could still have the committee meeting with the committee members on the next, on the planned one in February. Or we could stick with the date we already have in February and just say that we don't need the committee members to come to that one, so that we can have that as a working board meeting for us to be drafting that. Clearly, because we have to post it, it's open, anybody could show up if they want to, but it would not be the expectation that we are asking them all to participate and then put off until March.
And we kind of left it open to them. We said, we're gonna go back and strategize. We'll let you know if we need you in February.
Right.
And I think it was unclear. I was gonna send them all that short list of definitions again, even though we asked them to give feedback on it and they
Yeah.
already had the information, but I was thinking a reminder email.
That's
could
probably a good
be
idea, just to
worth
say, remember, if you have any
feedback on this, and I'll put that in there specifically.
I would say we may want to just send out the number 3, the board policy, just so that they can see, because we didn't really talk about the beginning of that at all, because
yes,
we wanted to leave that ability and open, because we weren't bound by exactly the language that was in there. And then we may decide to craft that. The general consensus from the group that was there was that they felt like that one was based a lot more on like race and ethnicity focus rather than in general. One of the committee members had looked up on IASB and gave us the definition of educational equity, which, had I finished the policy review at that point, I would have been able to cite that that's already one of our policies and that's a separate policy. He's not wrong, but it is something that we need to do it in, because they don't cancel each other out, but it's not as though we need to exactly adopt what's already there, because it's already there. And so we need to discuss how we want to do that. So I guess the question from the board generally is, do we want to stick with the February board meeting we already have, or add another one and keep that one with the committee? The idea being, it's time to start pretty much putting this in writing and having a draft, and then we can elicit their feedback on here's what we're looking at. And then bring it back to the greater board here to vote for it and put it in, so that we have it.
We formally asked them to commit to meet through May, I think it was. So it's not like we'd be losing anything, I don't think, if we said, hey, let's just us meet in February and we'll see you in March.
I think if they don't have a problem with it, then
No, I don't.
I think that just.
And we
I
also
think it's
aren't
a-
obligated to make through May, so we can get it wrapped up.
Exactly, too, yeah. It's like-
I think it's a good idea. Take their feedback, start drafting that policy, and then the next time we might be able to present that draft based on the feedback we got from them.
So do you want to add another meeting, or just stick with the February meeting?
I'm fine
And
with
then
the
maybe
February
ask
one.
committee members to
Yeah,
participate in
let's
March.
stick with one.
So I can send, that's why I didn't send anything out, because I said, oh, but we could send the reminder, one last call for feedback, here's the items. And by the way, we'll see you in March. We're gonna take the time in February to work.
Yeah, I think it's important that we take the time to really take their feedback and try and implement it in that draft, so that when we bring it back to them, they can see that we took their feedback and give us more.
In theory, March or April could be the final time we meet with community members.
That'd be nice if March we could bring them. a
Yeah, it'd be
draft
nice. And then
based on
we
their
could bring it to our
feedback
April
and-
meeting and adopt it. That would be awesome. But we'll see.
When is that meeting scheduled for?
February 28th.
Thank you. I was like, To look it up.
Last,
I knew it was later, so
yeah, it was Monday, February.
hopefully now all of us are through our
Maybe we'll be done in the
negotiations or
One more meeting,
COVID
5 more meetings.
protocols. and-
I think they're big ones.
They are.
We shall see. We'll get to that later.
Okay. All right, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. So I move upon recommendation of the administration that we approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes December 14th, 2021 regular board meeting minutes, the personnel report, the bill report, the treasurer's report, the annual renewal list, and FOIA requests.
Second,
Second by Mrs. Fingerhut. Will she please call the roll?
Holly,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Gallegos,
Aye.
Pelletier,
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
St. Clair,
I,
Rose.
Aye.
Someone from the policy,
Do you need water?
would someone from the policy committee like to make a motion for the next item on the agenda, which is the press policy 108?
I can take a stab at it. I move, let me find it, that the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve press policy number 108, second and final reading as presented with the edits as recommended by the policy committee.
Second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
As I record it. Fingerhut, aye. Holly,
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Pelletier,
Aye.
St. Clair,
I,
Gallegos.
Aye. I move the Board of Education of Mundelein Elementary School District 75 accept the book study, The Art of School Boarding at each monthly board meeting, not to exceed 30 minutes for February 22nd, chapters 1 through 8, and chapters 9 through 15 for March 15th.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
St. Clair,
I,
Fingerhut, aye. Rose,
Aye.
Pelletier,
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
I'd like to move to table the board member code of conduct discussion to the March 15th board meeting.
who did the second?
Yes, I do.
Second,
Please call the roll, please.
Holly.
Aye.
St. Clair,
I,
Gallegos.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Pelletier.
Aye.
Rose,
Aye.
Hitzke.
Okay, I move that the Board of Education go into executive session for the discussion of collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives. And discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act, whether for purposes of approval by the body or semi-annual review of the minutes as mandated by section 2.06 of the Illinois Code.
Second,
Please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Gallegos.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
St. Clair,
I,
Rose.
Aye.
That is 9:58. Yeah.
let me grab some water.
Mundelein Elementary School District 75 board meeting for Tuesday, January 25th, 2022. Secretary, please call the roll.
If they're 10:36. Holly.
Aye.
Here,
Here,
Rose.
sorry.
St. Clair,
I hear.
Fingerhut, here. Gallegos. Pelletier.
Here.
Hitzke.
Here.
Okay, I move that we approve the December 14, 2021 executive session minutes.
Second,
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye. Hitzke.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
St. Clair.
I,
Um,
And then is that where you were saying you were gonna?
yes, I can read them.
Go ahead. Thank you, Anna.
Go ahead and make a motion.
I move that. I don't know what I'm moving, so
You
fill
have
in.
executive session minutes in the purple, you should have the agenda.
Well,
And then-
but we just did that and voted on it. I'm very.
I know, right, but there's, it's individual.
Okay. I thought you were gonna
Do you just want to read
read
about it?
it. That's what I was
got it.
waiting for.
I think I have it. Okay, I move that the Board of Education of District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the closed session verbatim records be destroyed. All right, I'm confused now, sorry.
Top ones are being destroyed, the bottom are being kept.
No, we didn't talk about that in executive session, though, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I thought Fred did.
No, all he said was the minutes are gonna continue to remain confidential. That's what,
I thought he said that there were none that would come out. of-
right. Okay. But we didn't talk about anything at all about destroying verbatim records. Right? Because we have two motions here. One is for the verbatim records be destroyed, and the other one is to keep the closed session minutes continue to remain confidential.
We need to go back. and fix it.
Do the one and come back to the other one.
But I think because it's a biennial, I think we have to do them together so that we don't get off.
Okay, I'm gonna move that we approve, District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the following closed session minutes continue to require confidentiality and are recommended to remain in the closed session file. Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
go ahead.
Hitzke,
Aye.
Militaire.
Aye.
Fingerhut,
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
St. Clair. Aye. Rose,
Aye.
So I think the only difference is we're just saying it's destroying the recordings. It's not destroying the written. Right. So it's just getting rid of the tapes.
Because time has passed.
Right.
Correct.
Because time's.
That's more of a formality.
Okay.
I don't really review that. It's just time.
Yes, so we still have the written record from the meetings.
Yep.
Because it says superintendent's recommendation, whereas the other was Freddie's recommendation.
Well, they both say superintendent, so someone else can make the motion. I'm not gonna do that.
So move. Want me to read it?
Do we have a second?
I'm gonna read it. What's going on?
I make a motion that the Board of Education, One Line Elementary School District 75, accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the closed session verbatim records be destroyed as presented after January 25th, 2022.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Hiskey. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Rose,
Aye.
Al, Hitzke.
Aye.
Sorry. Militaire.
Aye.
Fingerhut,
Aye.
Gallegos,
Aye.
St. Clair. Aye. Holly,
Abstain. Okay, last thing is president's prerogative. I will send you a board agenda survey or a board meeting survey. There was something in the policy thing about ways to put an item on the agenda for the meeting. And I just want to reiterate to you that I always ask you at this point in time, is there anything you want to see us talk about in the next board meeting? So just, I want to make sure that everyone knows that I always do that. Is there anything anyone wants to see on the next meeting on the agenda? Speaking of that. Okay, hearing none. I don't really have anything else. Does anyone have anything else they want to talk about? Chrissy, I just wanted to address something that you said before when we're talking about policy. In the board meeting policy, it actually says that it's in the section about that you can't take any board action without it being on the agenda. But right after, there's a semicolon right after it says, but any other topic that's not on the agenda may be discussed. So I think that's just a clarification. Because you were saying before, like, oh, we can't talk about that.
No, I was saying that I think I was making a tongue in cheek joke, but when we were talking about the code of conduct piece. And I'm sorry, the board putting it on for public comment.
yeah.
I was just saying we couldn't take action on it today.
Right.
We could talk
Right.
about it. That's what I
Okay.
was saying, because it's not on the agenda, we
Okay.
wouldn't be voting on it tonight. That doesn't mean we couldn't talk about
Okay.
it. But I was suggesting we defer it until after we do a little more of the school onboarding, because then maybe we.
Okay, all right, maybe I just
Clarify that.
misunderstood
Yep.
what you said.
Nope.
Okay. All right, anything else for the good of the group? All right, you have a homework assignment for next month. February 22nd. I broke it up into 8 and 7 because we have a little less than a month till the next meeting, but then we only have 3 weeks till the March meeting because of spring break. So I broke it up that way, so just so you know. Okay? All right, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.